Chapter 82. Debt Collection. Chapter 82. Debt Collection. The Shi residence was located in an inner street of Kudu, slightly to the south. In comparison to the Pans and Fei's residences, its total land area was significantly smaller. It was also near Prince Qin's manor during the reign of Emperor Guangqing. The Shi had special permission, but the first few clan heads had much foresight and did not dare build their mansion beyond what was permitted in the regulations. The interior architectural style of the residence was more the style of Jueshi, while the building structures such as pavilions and terraces were all average and common. Shi Hongxian was on tenterhooks the entire journey back, but once he heard the sounds of horse hooves come to a stop, he knew he was home. Not daring to be careless, he bunched up the hem of his robe, which had been soaked until it was wrinkled, and hurried off the carriage, where he saw Shen Zichuan standing before him sizing up the Shi's residence. "It's an old mansion." Shi Hongxuan's tone was light and relaxed as he tried to keep up with his normal behavior. "Even though we keep saying all these years that we want to renovate it, we never had the time. Come over in a few days when the weather gets warmer to take a look at the blueprint too." Yet, Shen Zichuan turned his gaze towards the house next door. Those green glazed tiles at that end were obviously standard specifications, one of a prince's residence. But the lush trees covering the vermilion walls only made it look eerie. Shi Hongxian followed his gaze over and said, "That's the Prince Qin's manor." Prince Qin suffered from tuberculosis and passed away from his illness a year before the former emperor's ascension to the throne. This residence then fell into disuse. It'll probably be bestowed upon someone as a reward in the future. It looks even more imposing than Prince Chu's manor. Shen Zichuan did not shift his gaze away. "Of course." Shi Hongxian raised his thumb. The current emperor was not a child favored by Emperor Guangqing. At that time, the crown prince, Prince Qin, and the former emperor were the most outstanding ones among the imperial heirs. A pity the crown prince committed suicide at Zhaozi Temple. Prince Qin passed away of illness in his residence, and the former emperor lingered on his deathbed. He suddenly smiled. Otherwise, how could the current emperor have had the chance to sit on the throne? Prince Qin was also quite the pitiable one. He initially had a close father and son relationship with Emperor Guangqing during Emperor Guangqing's last few years, and Emperor Guangqing often came here. But someone in the manor under him used his influence to commit violence and beat a few villagers to death. Consequently, a lawsuit was lodged against him, and Emperor Guangqing punished him by putting him under house arrest in this residence. It was during that time Prince Qin contracted tuberculosis. Emperor Guangqing even made a special trip down for a visit. No one knew what they talked about, but they eventually parted on bad terms, and from then on, Prince Qin fell out of favor. That punishment to self-reflect behind closed doors dragged on, keeping him locked up until his death. Shen Zichuan tucked this piece of information away in his mind, but he had no wish to discuss it with Shi Hongxian. When Shi Hongxian saw that he had no interest in continuing the topic, he raised his hand to wave away the servants who were swarming over to them. He said, "Although this residence of mine is not as big as the residences of princes and aristocrats, there's still some way to travel. Lanzhou, my body is extremely weak, and I stink to high heavens. It'll be faster if we take a ride in the small sedan." Two of the servants from the Shi's residence rushed to prepare the sedans. Shi Dan was originally the household steward, but he did not dare to show himself now, and it was instead Shi Hongxuan's eldest sister-in-law who came out to greet and welcome them. Shi Hongxian loved this woman, or at least he said so himself. He had repeated countless times to Shen Zichuan that he wanted to kill Shi Guan because of the hatred he bore Shi Guan for seizing his wife away by force. But then, his expression was indifferent as he watched that woman descend the stairs. He did not ask for her to help support him either, and simply dismissed her in a perfunctory manner as he took his seat in the small sedan. Shen Zichuan lifted the curtain with a finger and saw it all clearly. Xiao Tianyao, who was following outside the sedan, wanted to speak, but Shen Zichuan gave a slight shake of his head to stop him. The small sedans entered the Shi's residence and made several turns before arriving at the courtyard where Shi Hongxian usually stayed. His courtyard was different from others. It was not overly decorated, and the long corridor was connected to an office with wide-open doors and windows, as well as a row of brightly lit lanterns. The sound of abacus within, mingled with various local accents, proved to be particularly noisy. There was a tea table erected under a mat awning on the open ground before the front hall, and seated and standing underneath the awning were the various shopkeepers and bookkeepers who had come from all over Dazhou. At the sight of Shi Hongxian, this motley crew of people all stood up and crowded around him. Those who were here to report expenses, prepare stocks, demand payments, and send greetings mobbed him all around, creating a din. Shi Hongxian first bowed to the crowd in a greeting, then said, "This humble one has only just returned. Look, with how stinky I smell, I won't be able to do any work. There's no need for any of you to be anxious. Wait here with peace of mind and take turns to go into the office on that end one at a time. As for me, I had merely headed out these few days for some fun. It's nothing of importance. Our business will naturally continue as usual. Oh, as for the shopkeepers here to demand payment, there's no need for you to fret as well. When has the Shi clan ever missed our deadlines and defaulted on our debts? As long as you have the memorandum with you, I will pay back all substantiated claims in full." Shi Hongxian hurriedly held Shen Zichuan firm as he pushed aside the crowd and called for the attendants to hurry over and serve tea and attend to them. He cupped his hands to those people the entire way before he managed to lead Shen Zichuan to a relatively quiet hall at the back. "Lanzhao, take a seat first. I'll go wash up a little and have a change of clothes before I return." Shi Hongxian shook his dirty robe and instructed the servants to prepare the food and wine. Shen Zichuan took his seat and drank the tea. By the time the wine and food to go with wine were served, Shi Hongxian had returned too. He was dressed in a brand new dark reddish-brown silk robe. He took his seat and personally poured wine for Shen Zichuan. "Sorry to have kept you waiting." Shi Hongxian touched the flesh between his neck and let out a cheeky chuckle. "Home is still where I feel comfortable. That cell is so awfully damp. I feel so refreshed all over now that I'm done washing up. Here, Lanzhao, drink up. You really did not show mercy this time. A few more days locked up in there, and I'll be dead meat for sure." "It won't go as far as that," Shen Zichuan said with a smile. "That was just to intimidate you. I won't deal you such a vicious blow for the sake of our friendship. You really caused me so much grief." Shi Hongxian groused with a bitter smile. "The state of my back looked to be in a frightfully bad state. I'll still have to call for a physician over to take a look at it later. Say, wouldn't it do for you to just tell me outright if you lack that 4 million? You just had to go around in such a big circle." Both men chatted merrily over wine, showing no signs of the mutual hostility an hour earlier when they had been at daggers drawn with each other. The wine was excellent, as were the dishes. It was only when Shi Hongxian was almost done eating that he wiped his mouth with a hand towel and spread his arms apart to sprawl back on the chair. He said, "It's not like I'm unwilling to give you the keys you want. But Lanzhao, you can have your cake and eat it too. If I returned Qi Huilian to you, then I'd lost something to fall back on, so I can't hand the keys over to you on top of him." Shen Zichuan, who did not eat much, set down his chopsticks and said, "I've done you a disservice in this matter too. But second young master, there are some matters which I didn't make up myself. Go make some inquiries out there, and you'll know that Wei Huaigu truly doesn't harbor good intentions and has no wish to help you out of your predicament at all. I know they all have their own ulterior motives." Shi Hongxian wiped away the fine beads of sweat. "But since you were able to get me out of prison to another place, it means that the imperial court didn't hand down that much of a punishment on me. This was His Majesty's idea, right?" His Majesty went to great effort to protect you, so the prison can't overstep their authority to investigate you. Now that you have been temporarily suspended from your post and have returned home, you won't be able to carry out your duties in the Bureau of Evaluations. Shen Zichuan changed the topic. I've already sent you back home. The issue of the keys can be renegotiated, but I want to see Qi Hualian now. Shi Hongxian threw aside the hand towel and smiled as he rubbed his stomach. He said, "As for the keys, we have to discuss and come to an understanding now. Lanzhou, you've never conducted a business deal before, so you aren't aware of the ins and outs of it. It's not the slightest bit simpler than being an official. Holding those keys will allow you to transfer out the silvers, but those are deadweight silvers. If you take them out, you will sooner or later come to spend it all clean. So why not put it inside and let me continue to take care of the business? Isn't it wonderful to let your money beget more money for you? However much you need in the future, all you have to do is to just give me a number." He sat tight in his chair. The earlier din had already disappeared without them realizing it. The windows and doors in his hall were all wide open, and the weeping willows outside shrouded in the color of ink looked like a row of hanged ghosts cramming at the windows looking in. The endless night was still and quiet, and the candle flame blazed a little. Those servants that had been waiting upon them all seemed to have vanished. It was as if both of them were the only ones left. Shen Zichuan slowly leaned back in his chair and said, "How the situation has changed. After stepping out of that prison cell, the second young master has indeed toughened up. I'm satiated after having had my fill of food and wine, and I'm not hurting any more." Shi Hongxian looked at Shen Zichuan and pointed to his own head, "And I'm still sober. I'm telling you, it's not a choice between Qi Hualian and the keys. Your only option is to take Qi Hualian away. As long as you give the nod, I will give him to you immediately." Shen Zichuan took his time. The little bamboo fan slid out from his sleeve pocket, and he grasped it for a moment to weigh it up. He said, "That's not what we discussed earlier." Shi Hongxian answered in a low, muffled voice, "The world of business is ever changing at a rapid pace. Earlier, you held me by the balls, and now, I'm the one who has you by the balls. The issues under discussion naturally have to change following this shift. What if I insist on both?" Shen Zichuan smiled. "Then it will all come to naught." Shi Hongxian patted his belly. "Let me offer you a piece of advice, Lanzhou. Don't be that greedy son of a bitch. As the saying goes, be content with your lot. You have already taken away 4 million. I won't pursue it further. This is already enough for a gesture of goodwill, right? Before the money has been delivered into my hands, it does not count as having taken it." Shen Zichuan did not divulge to him the part where these 4 million taels would be split into 2 portions to be transported through the Northeast Provisions bridle path. Instead, he said, "It's not an easy journey to make either. You know it better than I do. I have the channels for escorting the goods. No matter how competent Jiang Qingshan is, he can't keep an eye down there all the time." Shi Hongxian had already gained the upper hand. "I can think of ways to get the money to you. I said it before and I'll say it again. Lanzhou, I'm willing to give you these 4 million. But you have to tell me the truth. Are the 3 incidents of collapse, flooding, and epidemic you're doing?" "Of course not," Shen Zichuan said. "I've long told you the honest truth. For this matter, you have to ask Shuexiuzhua. I can see you keeping a tight grip over these keys, so I won't insist on it. As you've said, we cannot do without the other if we want to join forces. Now, can you give me Qi Hualian already?" Shi Hongxian pushed his chair aside to get up and say, "I've long gotten someone to go get him. You have been waiting for so many days, there's no need to fret over waiting a little longer now." With his rotund potbelly, he took some steps to aid digestion. Looking as if he was considering something, he eventually walked his way to the door and strode a step out, where he shouted, "Where's the man?" The servant outside whispered something in reply. Not hearing it clearly, Shi Hongxian continued down the stairs. He took a few more steps once he had descended. The courtyard was dead silent. He suddenly jerked around and bellowed, "Shut the doors!" All at once, the wide-open doors of the hall were shut tight, and the windows were secured with slabs of planks amid the sounds of thud. In the blink of an eye, the hall was completely sealed. Amidst the rustle of the night wind, which sent the grim willows swaying, several figures gradually materialized out of the night to lay siege to the hall. Shi Hongxian gritted his teeth in hatred as he ripped off his mask and said, "Shen Zichuan, you still want back Qi Hualian? How insatiably greedy of you, just like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. For treating me like a fool to push around, I shall take your life tonight." He retreated a few more steps back. "Drag over that double-crossing Shidan, who bites the hand that feeds him." Shidan had already been securely bound up by the others. On seeing him, Shi Hongxian first gave him a kick to the face and sent him toppling over to the ground before he stomped violently on him. "The audacity of you to sell your master out for money! Despicable bastard, rotten piece of shit! You forgot that I have your parents in my hands. I shall have your whole family follow him to the grave tonight." His eyes were already blazing with hatred as he spoke. "Drag the eldest mistress up here too. Does she really think I don't know she's addicted to hooking up with this lowlife behind my back? Shidan, with that pea-sized gut of yours, you would never dare to betray me. But lust is like a blade hanging above your head. 3. Who can you blame if you let someone get a handle against you and ended up involved in the whole sordid affair of betraying your master for money? Scum!" Shidan was kicked until he rolled all over the ground and howled in pain, while that eldest mistress, whose legs had turned to jelly, was flung before Shi Hongxian, where she wailed and pleaded ceaselessly. Shi Hongxian let her hug his thigh as he looked at her and said grimly, "Do you know he wanted to harm me? You know, and you still want to follow him. Were you already planning how to make your escape to somewhere far away with him? I've never treated anyone better in this life than I treated you. I put in 100% of my love and handed over 80% of my life. And this is how you treat me." With a pair of red eyes, Shi Hongxian hauled up the eldest mistress. "Shi Guan snatched you away and I snatched you back. I give you the same honor and prestige you have always enjoyed, and give you gold and jade so you never lacked for nothing. I hold you in both hands like my most precious treasure. You. Shi Hongxian was so consumed by hatred that his heart was dripping blood. "Leave with him. I'll send you both on your way tonight." Shi Hongxian shoved her down coldly and spat, then said with a fiendish smile, "Draw your blades. Mince up these heartless and ungrateful creatures, and we can save on the dishes to go with the wine tonight. This second master has the money." He fished out large quantities of gold and silver ingots from his bosom and sleeves and dropped them to the ground, where they rolled with a clatter. Amid the sound of money colliding against each other, Shi Hongxian staggered a few steps and burst out laughing with tears streaming down his face until his laughs gradually gave way to sobs. "All beings in this world are driven by benefit. I have money. So why bemoan the lack of someone true to me? For money, one can kill their closest kin, their flesh and blood, their beloved." Having thrown away all his gold and silver, Shi Hongxian raised both of his arms high and shouted himself hoarse under the glint of cold steel, "Do it! I'm here to collect my debt." The crowd promptly drew their blades, and snow-white light flashed. Chapter 83, Scenery of Spring. Chapter 83. Scenery of spring. Overcast clouds shrouded the moon, giving rise to flickers of ghostly apparitions. The scraping sound of blades being unsheathed was just like the sound of silk being ripped apart in the wind, the tearing of which spelled the pressing sense of danger of an imminent peril. There were 3 taps of the bamboo fan in the hall. Shen Zichuan remained calm and composed as he held the pot to pour himself another cup of wine. "You're right." Shen Zichuan picked up the wine cup. "We indeed have scores to settle tonight." Shi Hongxian lowered his arms and watched with cool detachment as the crowd swarmed towards the hall. He said, "Clever as you are, if you had been willing to comply obediently with the arrangements, you wouldn't have needed to suffer as much. The moment you enter Kudu, you're just like a caged bird in a pavilion, unmindful of the spreading blaze and danger ahead. You're really an unfortunate and a fortunate one. Back then, you fought the waves for a fighting chance at life, and for that, I toast you." As Shen Zichuan spoke, he slowly poured the wine over the ground. You and I both understand the principle that those trapped in prior predicaments are also the ones most unlikely to be obedient, because people who obey, 9 out of 10, will not hold out until heaven opens its eyes and lends them a hand. I fought against the battering of waves, and you are also fighting against the same. The lives of everyone in the world are worthless. Shen Zichuan, I toast you too. You survived in spite of all the torture and torment back then, but tonight you are going to fail miserably, like a boat capsizing in a drain, ha ha. Shi Hongxian laughed derisively, then abruptly turned indifferent. Between you and me, only one may live. You've taken your bath and drank your wine. Shen Zichuan tossed away the wine cup gently and rose to face the doors. He lifted his hand and grasped the hilt of Yang Shan Shui, his thumb pressing down against that white pearl as he laughed softly. "Do you really not intend to tell me Qi Hualian's whereabouts before you go on your way?" The flame in the courtyard abruptly intensified. Shi Hongxian turned his head for a look. The residence was already up in flames. He bellowed, "Don't bother contending with him. Whoever can take down his head, I'll reward said person with 200 taels of gold and silver." The doors and windows instantly broke apart as numerous shadows pounced like wolves. Shen Zichuan's blade had already left its sheath. He took 2 steps forward, and blood went splattering along with the movement of his blade. The long blade that was Yang Shan Shui seemed to be forged from ice and cast of snow as its blade slit open men's throats. It was so fast that there was not a stain of blood on the edge of the blade, even as the blood droplets spattered over the window's paper. Yang Shan Shui was the same as Longli blade. They lay low in this kudu collecting dust, restrained by their sheaths to become the waist ornaments of refined young masters. But give them the chance to be drawn out of their sheaths, and one would be able to catch a glimpse of the bloodthirsty savagery of the blades and their masters from those cold glints. The tongue of flames came licking in a fury, and in a blink of an eye, half of the Shi's residence was engulfed in a sea of fire. Qiao Tianyao leaped up the rooftop and dashed along the ridge to kick over the incoming killers with swift flying kicks before he hooked himself upside down and flipped atop the central hall. He stood on the roof and flashed Shen Zichuan's gold-lacquered waist token. "The Imperial bodyguards are investigating a case on Imperial orders. The Shi clan assembled more than 100 gallant men from the martial fraternity for a private gathering right under the sun of heaven's nose. Our investigations have unearthed the presence of criminal fugitives and outlaws still at large among them. Shi Hongxuan's intention is no small matter. For this, he ought to be executed," Qiao Tianya said in a clear and loud voice. "This case pertains to the incident in which the Son of Heaven was placed in harm's way. Anyone caught involved will be taken into custody at the Imperial prison. The Red Cavalry, too, has already surrounded Shi's residence. You people'd best surrender without a fight." "Don't listen to his nonsense," Shi Hongxian shouted. "I'm the Son of Heaven's friend, one who has been through life and death with him. The Imperial bodyguards harbor the intent to murder loyal ministers to cover up their crimes. Those who aid me tonight are all upright heroes. You will all follow me to the palace gates tomorrow morning to receive your rewards." That burning loft collapsed with a thunderous crash. Shi Hongxian did not retreat a single step amid the waves of heat as he stared closely at the figure in the hall. That eunuch faction has only just been eradicated. His Majesty advocates freedom of speech, and what he hates the most are treacherous officials like Shen Zichuan who want to abuse his power to deceive the masses and lord it over all. Gentlemen, The one who kills him will be a famous hero with his meritorious deeds recorded in history for ages to come. Xiao Tianya secretly spat. This fatty she's eloquence was truly outstanding. If they could not gag that mouth of his, then he could even make black out to be white. Xiao Tianya promptly kept away the token and leaped down, where he drew his blade to face the enemy's head-on. The sheen of blood stood out against the blaze in the courtyard. Up ahead, the scene was already in chaos, with shouts and cries everywhere as shopkeepers, bookkeepers, and servants ran haphazardly all around. The formation of red cavalry outside moved swiftly, having already blocked off all the gates. A strapping figure suddenly stood out from the hall. Shi Hongxian looked on indifferently. That body leaned back, as straight as a ramrod, and toppled over onto the stairs, the blood on its neck gushing forth incessantly. Shen Zichuan withdrew his blade and returned it to his sheath, then strode over the corpse's arm and walked down one step at a time. Shi Hongxian suddenly burst out laughing. He laughed until he shook all over. He said, "I still can't compare to you. By using this reason to kill me, even His Majesty won't dare to blame or censure you." Shen Zichuan inclined his head to survey that raging fire and said, "You aren't originally meant to die this early." Shi Hongxian looked up at the sky and let out a long sigh. He was extraordinarily calm. Those merry laughters and furious curses had all become a thing of the past. He said, "Whether I die early or later, I'm still being played for the fool in your hands. It's too fucking much of an aggrievement. But it's of no loss to me to lose to you. Shen Zichuan, I concede defeat. At the same time, I can't take it lying down. 100 forges to temper steel 3. Do you think you have already reached that stage? The reason I meet my end tonight is because I underestimated my enemy. However, there are plenty of people in this world who see you as the thorn in their side. They are all lined up in a queue waiting for you. You may kill one, then another one, but you will never be able to kill them all. How lamentable!" He gazed silently at the night sky. "You and I were not born to be favored. Things that are readily available to the others are yet things you and I have to fight for with our lives. The prejudice between children born of the principal wives and concubines is deeply rooted. For how absurd is it for me to be clearly born of the principal wife, yet live a life worse than the sons from the other clans born of concubines? My life is worthless, and yours, even more so. You want to charge ahead, to fight, to seize. But who exactly will succeed or fail in the days to come?" Shi Hongxian spread his arms open, as if he was asking heaven. At the same time, it was also as if he was asking Shen Zichuan, "There is no end to strife. Who exactly will fail or succeed in the days to come? Will you be able to secure your victory once I'm gone? You kill the others and the others kill you. Ha!" The sounds of Shi Hongxuan's laughter were wild and unbridled. He suddenly crouched down to pull out the blade from the corpse on the ground and stumbled his way closer towards Shen Zichuan. "I'm a man of the Shi clan. In this life, I've triumphed thrice over Shi Guan. I'm no less inferior to him. It's my parents who were blind. I placed my love in the wrong person, and exhausted all my love and hatred. Shi Hongxian brandished the blade to slit his own throat. Hot blood spurted over Shen Zichuan's body. The blade tumbled to the ground, and he pulled at Shen Zichuan's sleeve as he slid down to his knees along with the blade, slurring his words as he completed the last of his words with a forced smile. "Shall wait for you on the path to the underworld." Shen Zichuan watched Shi Hongxian fall at his feet. Warm blood trickled down his fingers. He stood in silence for a very long time against a backdrop of roaring fire, then lifted his hand to shake off the droplets of blood. The Shi residence was burned to ashes, and the imperial bodyguards brought the remaining survivors in the Shi's residence into the imperial prison. Shen Zichuan had Shi Hongxuan's deeds, in which he amassed hired hands and resisted arrest, all recorded in a memorial which he submitted to Li Jianheng to make his report when he met with the latter personally. Li Jianheng was greatly shocked, but there was irrefutable evidence of Shi Hongxian gathering men in his estate, and the imperial bodyguards had thoroughly checked the backgrounds of these people through the Ministry of Justice. This matter was handled so impeccably with no loose ends that even the imperial censors could find no fault with it. Wei Huaigu was the most slick and sly. On seeing this, he promptly hinted to his pupils to first denounce Shi Hongxian as a treacherous villain who had poisoned the Son of Heaven's mind and led him astray, before decrying Shi Hongxian for putting His Majesty in harm's way. The collapse of the Ohua Pavilion was actually entirely staged by himself. The Wei clan really went all out to absolve themselves of blame. Such was the state of affairs when the tea had cooled after the company had left. 5 Yet, even when Gu Qingqing brought men to search up and down the streets and alleys of Kudu and examine all entry and exit documents, they still never managed to find Qi Huilian and Ji Gang. They are definitely still in Kudu. Shun Zichuan closed the work documents on the desk. He has the intention to use teacher to threaten me. Sending them out of Kudu, if he did, would only make it harder for him to control and manipulate them. Teacher is a scholar, but Shifu is a worthy opponent with few equals. Xiao Tianya said, I've already sent men to secretly search for them these days. The search would surely throw up something. Shun Zichuan said nothing. Seeing Shun Zichuan deep in his own thoughts, Xiao Tianyao was about to take his leave when Shun Zichuan called out to him, Since there is no other business tonight, I'll make a trip to the Plum Blossom residence. There are many matters to be discussed. You should leave first and wait for me there. Ask Gu Jin, who are those in the batch of people Shangyun Villa sold to Shuexiuzhua. Xiao Tianya uttered an acknowledgement and took his leave. When he stepped out the door, he saw a few people resting in the courtyard. There were all seniors in the imperial bodyguards of 4th grade and above. Among them, there were even a few whose ancestors had been bestowed with titles and properties, and who could don python robes 6 and carry Xiuquan blades. 7 Gu Qingqing had led his men to rest on the other side. Although everyone was an imperial bodyguard, Xiao Tianya could make out the subtle split into cliques among them. Shun Zichuan had advanced through the ranks too quickly within the last 6 months, which inevitably made others green with envy. Furthermore, with his close proximity to men in power on all sides, he had taken over the mantle of the northern judge, 8 which could be considered to have established him as the top dog in the upper echelon of the imperial bodyguards for real. The web of connections between the men was as convoluted as a labyrinth. Everyone, even if picked at random, was of privileged background and title. When the new replaced the old, it was customary for them to swap pointers with one another. It was only because Shun Zichuan had been too busy with his official duties that he had yet to draw close to them. But once the busy spring farming season had passed, everyone was bound to see each other one way or another during their subsequent missions. Xiao Tianya's heart sank slightly. He let down the curtain and left ahead of Shun Zichuan. Shao Qia had yet to return from the military drill grounds at Mount Feng, and only Gu Jin was still at the Plum Blossom residence. Xiao Tianya drank half a cup of wine with him and made some inquiries into the matter of Shangyun Villa. A total of 16 people of similar ages. All of them were young boys and girls below the age of 20. Gu Jin and Xiao Tianya sat on the railing at the bottom of the veranda. The weather was fine today, with the sight of green buds and sprouts filling their visions. He said, As for their specific backgrounds and origins, I have already told Tao Zi to write them out and hand them over to the young master. Your master will be able to see it a little later. However, this is not an easy matter to investigate. These people are a motley crew, like a jumbled cluster of grass. There are no other similarities between them other than their ages. Doesn't this already illustrate the problem? Xiao Tianya picked up that little porcelain cup that was half the size of a typical cup and drank up the wine. He frowned as he savored the taste of it. The harder this batch of people is to investigate, the more important they are. This wine is pretty good, but why use it with such a cup? It's not even the size of my finger. Drinking holds you up from your work. If you reek of wine when the masters return later, you're bound to get scolded. Gu Jin did not dare to drink as liberally as he always did these few days after having received a dressing down from Xiao Qia the last time. He simply sat for a moment. The patrols in the Plum Blossom residence were under his charge, so he left just a short while later and let Xiao Tianya have fun by himself. Xiao Tianya sat alone on the veranda and drank his wine as he appreciated the sight of spring. There was no one around, and he enjoyed himself nonetheless. He remembered that his zither was still here, thus he thought of taking it out to play. He rose to his feet and made a detour carrying the tray in hand, passing through branches that looked like green mist when he suddenly heard the zither. Xiao Tianya followed the sound in search of it. He did not charge out hastily, but instead brushed aside the green mist and took a peek out of the corner of his eyes. The long walkway was facing the natural sunlight, and sitting underneath was a brightly illuminated man who was sitting cross-legged. This man's entire head of black hair was adorned with an aged wooden hairpin. He was not wearing a crown, and he was wearing a sky-blue wide-sleeved robe with a Zhaowen bag 9 hanging from his waist. Xiao Tianya could not get a clear look at his face. All he could see was him idly plucking away at the strings. He would play a tune, then stop. A music score was laid out beside him. He was pondering it over when a gray-white kitten suddenly sprang onto his back and threaded its way around the sides of his neck to fish up locks of his hair with its paw to play with. This man carried the cat down and tucked it in his sleeve, his mind still on the zither. Xiao Tianya recognized the zither as his own. He stepped forward slowly and gradually came to see this man's face as his angle shifted. The willow catkins of the 4th lunar month in spring drifted, while the green velvet buds all hung out to dry under the resplendent sunlight. This man was fair. Unlike Shen Zichuan's icy fairness, which looked as though he was immersed in frost, this man seemed more like a smooth white jade placed under the sunlight of spring. He did not have Shen Zichuan's cutting-edge sharpness, nor did he have Shen Zichuan's breathtaking allure. But he was in a class of his own, ethereal and unforgettable. Xiao Tianya used to be a young master of a family of officials. In this moment, he recalled a poem his eldest sister-in-law had previously recited. Such is the mountain of rocks like jade, as is the forest of pines like jadeite. His unrivaled beauty, one of a kind, second to none, a man divine. 10 Both of them had not even conversed with one another, and Xiao Tianya already knew who he was. Truly the epitome of a man of leisure. Xiao Tianya strode up the railings and set the tray down on the ground. No need to keep looking at the score for this tune. If you're keen to learn, I can teach you. This man lifted his eyes to look at him. He laughed and said, I think of wine, and the wine comes. I seek the tune, and the tune appears. Buddy, you're truly my lucky star. The springtime landscape in this residence is excellent. A pity no one appreciates it. It's fate that I get to encounter you while enjoying the sights of spring. And it's still fate that I get to listen to this melody. Bosom guests are hard to come by in this world. I'm no good at anything except playing the zither well. If you miss the opportunity that is me, then there will be no one else who is up to teaching you. Xiao Tianya poured wine for himself while standing. After drinking a cup, he tilted his chin at the man. So, are you learning or not? Serving one's teacher is akin to serving one's father. 11 This man put down the zither and dangled his jade pendant to tease the cat. He said in a composed and unhurried manner, I can acknowledge you as my teacher, but to be someone's teacher, you must first convince the person. Xiao Tianya stroked his slightly stubbled chin and said, I, Xiao Tianya, never lie. Acknowledge me if you're willing to believe me. Else forget it. This man loosened his grip on the jade pendant and looked at Xiao Tianya again. After a while, he smiled and said, I believe you. By the time Xiao Qia returned to the Plum Blossom residence, it was already dark. It was only when he dismounted that Chen Yang remembered and said as he led the horse, Master, they said a few days ago that young Master Yao has returned. Although he avoided the banquet, he will call on us to pay us a visit. He's a hard one to track down. Who knows when his interest for a visit will come calling? Xiao Qie took off his dusty and sweat-soaked outer robe and strode through the door to enter. If he comes, tell the kitchen to prepare some light dishes for him. He has been with Secretariat Elder Hai long enough that he has grown accustomed to it and hardly consumes meat. Gu Jin came out to them, then followed Xiao Qie inside. Xiao Qie stroked Meng, who was on his shoulder, and said, "Bring in some white meat and fresh water. It's tired out today too. Is my man here?" Gu Jin nodded and said, "He arrived a little less than an hour ago. He's currently handling official affairs in the study." Xiao Qie asked, "Has he taken his meal?" Gu Jin replied, "No. His Excellency specially told the kitchen that he'd wait for the young master to return before having dinner together." Xiao Qie looked at him as he turned his thumb ring around. Gu Jin got the hint and averted his gaze, not daring to stare at Xiao Qie further. But Xiao Qie's mood did indeed take a turn for the better. Before he entered the room, he took off Longly blade and tossed it to Gu Jin. "Give the sheath a wipe." Xiao Qie pulled up the front of his clothes to take a sniff of the scent on his own body. "Send it in a while. When it comes to sharpening the blade, I still ought to do it myself. Have someone keep an eye on the serving of dishes. There will be a lot going on tonight, but the water must be heated up enough. Where is Qiao Tianya? Have him take his master's python robe to the laundry room and scent it with incense before the morning court. That's all for now. You may go." Gu Jin acknowledged his command and withdrew, and Xiao Qie pushed the door open. Shen Zichuan had been inside listening for quite a while. He dipped the brush in ink without lifting his head and merely said, "How virtuous! The second young master is truly a man after my own heart." Chapter 84, Wealth. Chapter 84, Wealth. Xiao Qie was conscious of the fact that he was reeking of sweat after having ran around the military drill grounds for the entire day, so he did not go around to the other side of the table but instead took his seat on this side. There were stacks of case files on the table, some of which were sealed with the Ministry of Justice's memorandum slip. From the time indicated on top, they were all from a very long time ago. "You're investigating old cases." Xiao Qie put up one hand on the back of the chair, and picked up the little bamboo fan that Shen Zichuan had set on the table to fiddle with. "Just the Imperial Prisons cases alone took you half a month to investigate. Why are you even looking at the cases from the Ministry of Justice now? There was a vacuum in the Imperial Prison in the 4 years before the former emperor ascended to the throne." Shen Zichuan looked at the files. At that time, Ji Lei had Pan Rugi as his backing, so it's unlikely he would muck around to the point where he did not have a single assignment. But the Imperial Prison did not leave any case records behind, proving that many cases of that time could still uphold the standard judicial process of the 3 judicial offices' joint trial. Ji Lei could only follow behind the Ministry of Justice running odd jobs for them. What I mean is... Xiao Qie exerted a little force on 2 of his fingers to use the fan to block Shen Zichuan's view of the files and lifted his chin. "What are we looking into the old cases for? It was also here we previously discussed the case in which Zhongbu's troops were defeated." Shen Zichuan set down the brush. "I spoke of befriending a distant state while attacking one nearby. One, do you still remember?" Xiao Qie withdrew the fan and rose to his feet. He sidestepped the table and walked towards the inner side of the bookshelf. After a while, he emerged, carrying a scroll of a map. Shen Zichuan pushed away the documents on the table, and Xiao Qie tossed out the scroll to spread it out on the table. It was an extremely detailed military topographic map. "This is a treasure of mine I stashed away for special occasions." Xiao Qie used the fan to draw a circle around the location of the 6 prefectures of Zhongbu. "I naturally remember all that you've said. You're referring to the fact that someone used the Biancha cavalry to knock out the 6 prefectures of Zhongbu, which lies close to Kudu. This is attacking a nearby state. Then, the Hua clan fell into decline, and the Empress Dowager was forced to marry Hua III to Chidong. This is befriending a distant state. If we put these two together, then we can see that it's to take away Li Bei's powers by subtle means, rendering it powerless so that Li Bei would be caught in a predicament where it has no support nearby and no assistance from afar. But the time such a game plan needs is too long, and the variables are countless. If the other party wants to ensure that every chess move he makes is without error, then he has to remain in a position where he can view the entire game. Shun Zichuan rose and slid his finger from Zhongbua on the map to Kudu. He has to be here. The former emperor reigned for 8 years, which is too short to hatch a plot for the defeat of the Zhongbua's troops. The time has to be pushed forward. Many things have happened during Emperor Guangqing's reign in the era of Yongyi, and these incidents have more or less influenced the direction in which the situation moved. He has to be somewhere within. I'm thinking of using these old cases to find some clues. Xiao Qia looked at the map and said, "It's hard to get a full view of it just from the files alone. You have to find someone who was involved or someone who knows the details." Propping himself up, Shun Zichuan looked aside at him and said, "I don't have such a person." Xiao Qia returned the fan to Shun Zichuan and said, "On the contrary, I do have a candidate to recommend, but what are you going to bribe me with?" Shun Zichuan smiled and grasped the other end of the fan, but he did not take it away. Instead, he simply looked at him in this way and said, "Let me guess. The one you want to recommend to me is Yao Wenyu, right? He's a member of the Yao clan. He would indeed know better of the many incidents that had occurred during that period. What's more, he later went on to acknowledge Hai Liangyi as his teacher. Hai Liangyi has successively served in an official capacity in the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Personnel. He would, of course, know the details best." Xiao Qia pulled the fan closer. "Or do you not care to meet him? I've long heard of his name," Shun Zichuan said. "Whether he truly has the capabilities or is simply all form and no substance, I will know after meeting him. I do want to meet him, but when will he come? After today I'll be tied down with work for the latter half of the month. Everyone else is queuing up to present their visitation cards to him so that they can meet him. Which of them has such the prestige as His Excellency Shun?" Xiao Qia said with a smile. "He is like the banished immortal three who has fallen from heaven, not meant for me to use. So even if I rack my brain and try every means possible to play up to him, it'd be a futile effort." What Shun Zichuan said was the truth. He had indeed heard of Yao Wenyu, but if they were to put this man together with Shuexiuzhua, he would rather choose Shuexiuzhua. This was because what they were doing was secular work. There were simply too many sordid matters down here. So even if one were to praise such an otherworldly divine being to the skies, he still did not have the inclination to woo said person over to their side. Scholars were basically and practically useless, for being an official was no less carefree than the courtesan prostituting herself in a brothel. Flattering those above you and trampling those under you, ingratiating yourself with another, taking a beating with a smile, each one of these acts was an art in itself. That Hai Liangyi did not get Yao Wenyu to descend to this mundane world was already enough to get a glimpse of Yao Wenyu's temperament. Who could bear to hold an immortal down in the quagmire? Just let him remain free and happy as he always had been. But Xiao Qia thought differently. However, he was in no hurry to voice it out and only said, "I'm merely a casual acquaintance of his. He has friends all over the world, but those who can truly sit with him for a chat are few and far between. His courteous but distant exchange of pleasantries is just the same as yours. You can just meet each other briefly and make an impression on each other. Should a need arise in the future, you'd be able to make each other acquaintances." Hearing him put it this way, Shun Zichuan did not turn it down further. Xiao Qia would not recommend a person for no rhyme or reason. Shun Zichuan made a mental note of it, planning to get Xiao Tianya to free up some time later to meet him first. Xiao Qie had spoken with Shun Zichuan as soon as he entered. It was extremely hot at the moment. The sweat he had worked up riding the horse on the way here had yet to dry up, and the sky outside had already gone dark. Seeing as his temples were still wet, Shun Zichuan said, "Go take a bath and have a change of clothing. By the time you come out, you'll just be in time for dinner. We can discuss the other trivial matters later." Virtuous. Xiao Qie lifted his leg to push aside the chair and suddenly bent over to hoist Shin Zichuan over his shoulder again. Being considerate in words is only considered half of it. Let's bathe together. We get to save time, economize effort, and conserve water. Shin Zichuan lowered his hand, wanting to correct the position of the brush that had been knocked askew. But Xiao Qie had already taken a stride out to walk away. The hot water at the back was prepared pretty fast. Once the curtain was pulled down, it remained there for close to 4 hours. No one dared to interrupt the flow of firewood throughout. Chen Yang, being the most tactful, could read the situation best. Seeing as Xiao Qie was about to take a bath, he instructed the kitchen to prepare the ingredients for the main dishes first, since there was no hurry to cook them as yet. Shun Zichuan understood one thing, which was that he could starve anyone but not Xiao Qie. Xiao Qie could not endure it the slightest. He would place all those days Shun Zichuan had owed him inside, demanding his repayment as he held him in his grip. He was full of vigor and energy, and whatever bit of capability Shun Zichuan had simply could not be compared to Xiao Qie's diligence and thirst for learning. "I know it all." Xiao Qie reached a hand out to rub Shun Zichuan's right earlobe and clung close to Shun Zichuan's ear to say, "There's no hurry to discuss Shi Hongshuan's matter tonight. You've been getting Gu Qingqing to scout around lately. Are you looking for Ji Gangshifu? The Imperial Army is keeping guard at the gates on our end. If there is an anomaly with the comings and goings, I'll send someone to notify you." Shun Zichuan reddened from the rubs. He propped his back against Xiao Qie's arm and closed his eyes to catch his breath, exposing his fair neck before him. His entire chest was heaving. Other than this, Xiao Qie fastened the earring for him. "This second young master will not talk about anything else tonight." Shun Zichuan leaned forward and the waves built up layer by layer. He had a feeling of having a full stomach, and on top of this, he tasted the pleasure and thrill of extreme abandon. It threw his consciousness into chaos, making him murmur vague words under his breath, so much that Xiao Qie, hearing him, went numb all over. Between them, there was no putting away the wine cups after taking a tiny sip, only making merry to their heart's content. 5. The undisguised desire was what they sought from the other. Both men needed that headlong rush of when they held each other. Every worry they had could all be washed away into oblivion by this extremely harmonious and passionate coupling. They never whispered sweet nothings in the most intense moment, when the surge of lust and desire for love interweaved. Instead, they replaced them with kisses in unspoken agreement. The impassioned it was, the more they had to kiss. The water in the bathroom splashed all over the ground, and the steamy water vapor covered all remaining light from the window. The night was so deep, so quiet, that other than Shun Zichuan's voice, Xiao Qie could not hear anything at all. He threw himself entirely into it, leaving nothing behind. By the time Xiao Qie finally had his fair share, he had already lost all track of time. He brushed away Shun Zichuan's thoroughly soaked hair and caressed Shun Zichuan's wet cheek. Shun Zichuan lifted his fair neck high, hooked him closer, and licked his lips wet. Xiao Qie had yet to pull out. He kissed Shun Zichuan in this position and picked him up. Shun Zichuan let him kiss as he reached out his fingers to feel his way to the messy discharge. He rubbed it all on Xiao Qie's body until he was utterly exhausted and drained. After they were done, Shun Zichuan ate a little porridge and got stuffed several more mouthfuls of steamed twisted rolls by Xiao Qie. He had already changed into a clean inner garment. With Xiao Qie's robe draped over him, he watched Xiao Qie eat his meal. Xiao Qie had an astonishing appetite lately. Shen Zichuan did not know what he was doing over at the military drill grounds at Mount Feng, but he keenly sensed that Xiao Qie was not in a good mood today. Go sleep on the bed. Xiao Qie lifted his head to glance at Shen Zichuan and said, You'll catch a cold if you lie prone here. Shen Zichuan moved a fish over and grasped his chopsticks to pick out the fish bones. He was indeed tired to the point he was dozing off, but he still took his time to say, The repair and renovation of the military drill grounds have only just concluded, and there are enough funds to cover the costs. Looking at your expression though, is someone playing dirty tricks? Xiao Qie ate for a moment with a calm expression before he said, I want to add the blunderbuss 6 to the Imperial Army's arsenal. Tough. Shen Zichuan instantly knew the reason for his displeasure today. At present, the blunderbuss was only allocated to the 8 great training divisions. This stuff was valuable, and the Ministry of War would not assign it out easily, much less assign it to Xiao Qie. Xiao Qie had long set his eyes on them. The 8 great training divisions had consigned this batch of bronze blunderbuss to their arsenal, where they had been sitting idly all this while. He had taken a few out to play with the last time, and it was from that time onwards that he started harboring the intent. But Xiao Qie knew that this request of his would definitely hit a wall at the Ministry of War. Even Li Jianheng himself had no say in this matter, because it was of great significance, and the power to decide lay firmly in the hands of the Grand Secretary of the Grand Secretariat, Hai Liangyi. Shen Zichuan thought for a moment. He held out the fish meat with his chopsticks to Xiao Qie and said, This thinking of yours in letting the Imperial Army test the waters in preparation for Li Bei's armored cavalry is too obvious. Considering the current situation in which they can't set you free, Hai Liangyi will no doubt disagree. Xiao Qie did not like to eat fish because he was too impatient to pick out the fish bones, but now that he tasted it, he found it to be still acceptable. He ate as much as Shen Zichuan fed him and only said when the chopsticks were set down, Even if he doesn't agree, I'll still think of ways to get my hands on them. Li Bei has military craftsmen. With the blueprint in hand, they should be able to copy it, like drawing a tiger with a cat as a model. As long as they had the blueprint, everything else would be a breeze. It's just that this blueprint is not easy to get our hands on. Shen Zichuan rinsed his mouth from Xiao Qie's hands and thought for a moment before he continued, Hai Liangyi keeps a pretty tight watch on this thing. But Xiao Qie was determined to have it, and the reason he had to have this thing was something Shen Zichuan understood the best. Hua Xiangyi was about to marry down to Qidong soon. Kudu's strategy of befriending a distant state while attacking one nearby was already beginning to take shape. Li Bei must make corresponding adjustments as soon as possible. The Li Bei armored cavalry was not an invincible army. The reason it remained infallible was that its 2 successive commanders-in-chief were resourceful and adaptable to changing circumstances. If the Qi clan really fell out with Li Bei because of the marriage alliance, then, other than considering strategies to deal with the Bianxia cavalry, Li Bei would also need to consider tactics to deal with the Qi clan's infantry. The Minister of War, Chen Zhen, and Kong Qiu come from the same hometown. With this layer of connection, he could also be considered an official under Hai Liangyi. This man has some friendly relations with my father. He wouldn't necessarily even do my eldest brother a favor in the past. And now that it's come to me, recalling the displeasure of yesterday, Xiao Qie paused for a moment before he merely said, There got to be another way somehow. Once Xiao Qie had finished his meal, Shen Zichuan extinguished the lamp. Both men lay on the bed, sharing a pillow. Shen Zichuan had a plan in his mind and spoke up, It'll be hard to go through Chunjun. Since he is from the same hometown as Kong Qiu, then it means he's from Qidong. Between Qidong and Li Bei, he would already have an inherent bias towards one. Blunderbuss. The Imperial bodyguards might have the blueprint. Xiao Qie pulled him over for an embrace. He closed his eyes and said, Shi Hongxian has only just died, and those keys have already become a masterless gold mine. Everyone is watching you now, they are all dying to rip you apart to search for them. and you just happen to incur your colleague's jealousy and envy at present. You need not bother with this matter. Look here. This second young master has a way. Shen Zichuan did not answer. Instead, he smiled. Xiao Qie slowly opened his eyes and said, "Those 2,000,000 taels of silver will not enter Li Bei. I've already spoken to my eldest brother. The money will stop at Sizhou. You can take out these silvers anytime you go back there. You can't even play for nuts with 4,000,000 taels. This second young master wants to give you even more." They were clearly trapped in kudu, yet the way he said it was so genuine and sincere. Perhaps Xiao Qie had told lies in the past, but he would not lie at this very moment. He was like a wolf pup collecting and hoarding up the stars, wanting to stuff it all to Shun Zichuan like that entire jewelry box of pearls and jade earrings. More often than not, he carried it out in action than to voice it with words. On hearing this, Shun Zichuan suddenly looked back and said, "Actually, it's not just 4,000,000. Shi Hongxian had indeed kept his keys securely hidden away. But he's no sage. It would be inevitable for him to divulge a word or two here and there to people close to him after hearing some pillow talk." The clandestine love affair between his eldest sister-in-law and Shi Dan had gone on for quite some time. Both of them were actually tricking the secret out of him all along. 68 keys, 30 of which I know of. Meanwhile, Xiao Qie, who was so poor that he was on the verge of selling his residences, was a little shamed into anger. He turned over to block off Shun Zichuan's mouth, biting him until Shun Zichuan gasped lightly for breath. "Xiaoer." Feeling the pain, Shun Zichuan was resentful. "You're—" Xiao Qie pinched his chin to stop him from voicing it out. Both men toppled into the bedding, trading peremptory kisses. The wind outside the room came and went, leisurely and carefree, sending the wind chimes under the eaves tinkling. Ding Tao just happened to be on the rooftop feeding that plump sparrow of his. He had kept the sparrow in his sleeves, fishing it out from time to take a few looks at it. It was at this moment he heard the sound of the pillow being pushed off inside the room. He held the sparrow, wanting to stretch his head out for a look, but not daring to. Looking around, he saw his various gidge, each in their own respective days. He gulped and said, I guess I'll tell you a story. My father previously wrote it in the book. There was this." Qiao Tianya and Gu Jin kept their voices down and said evenly, "You shut up." Chapter 85. Assignment. Chapter 85. Assignment. With such a great misfortune befalling the Shi clan, and with Shi Hongxian having no children to take over the mantle, the shops in the various localities all temporarily suspended operations. The shopkeepers sent letters to Kudu, ready to set up a morning hall in their old home and to discuss plans for the future. Sitting on the chair, Shun Zichuan instructed, "This journey is a far one to make, and you're also bringing along womenfolk. I don't feel reassured. Xiaowu, lead a few of our men to escort this elder brother Shi there." Shi Dan understood the meaning in Shun Zichuan's words. Afraid to doubt him, he hurriedly kowtowed to show his gratitude. There's only the eldest mistress who can head the Shi clan now. Shun Zichuan glanced at the account books before him and said, "Pay some attention when you go back. Other matters are of no rush. Stabilize the current situation first. Don't lose your head. The deal we had discussed a few days back can be temporarily set aside as well. Once you obtain the keys, keep a low profile, and check the money vault's entryways. A man's wealth is his own ruin by rousing greed in others. Now that you have to look after such a big business and also manage the money vault, you're bound to encounter some trouble." Shi Dan naturally understood that he could only bank on Shun Zichuan for protection now. He was a smart man who, having followed Shi Hongxian, knew best to assess the situation. Going all out to work for Shun Zichuan was precisely to prevent himself from being regarded as a sacrificial chess piece to be discarded by the latter. With such guidance from Master, this lowly one dare not be sloppy. "I'll do my best to stabilize the business for Master when I return to my hometown." Shi Hongxian trusted you that much all because you have the capabilities to speak of. He was overbearing and domineering in the past, and was only willing to get you to work on the account. But it's different now, and I'm giving you the chance to show your mettle. Shen Zichuan set the account book aside without looking at him. Be honest in your work and play by the rules, and there will be plenty of chances for you to be in charge in the future. But if you deceive me, even by just one word, then I will claim this tongue of yours. He said it lightly and breezily, but Shi Dan felt chilled to the marrow on hearing it. He hurriedly kowtowed again, not daring to look at Shen Zichuan further. It was noon after Shen Zichuan dismissed Shi Dan and when Gu Qingqing returned. Gu Qingqing entered and removed his blade, and the errand runner at the side came over to serve him tea, which he downed in one gulp. No one. Gu Qingqing pulled out a chair and sat down. He said, all the Shi clan's residences in Kudu have been thoroughly searched. There's no sign of teacher and Shifu whatsoever. Shen Zichuan said nothing as he leaned against the chair in silence with a displeased expression. Could they be in a manor outside the city? Gu Qingqing wiped his sweat. The Shi clan has many manors out there too. Who knows, he might really have hidden them outside. Shifu isn't teacher. It has been so long. He would surely think of a way to come back and see me. But he didn't. Shen Zichuan's heart sank. This shows that he's trapped somewhere. He can't come back. Ji Gang was not Qi Huilian, who was too weak to trust even a chicken. There was almost no one who was his match in Kudu. Perhaps there was a highly skilled expert among the men from the martial fraternity whom Shi Hongxian had hired with a large sum of money. But now that Shi Hongxian was dead, this group of martial artists should have already scattered and fled, busily dodging the pursuit of the imperial court. So, where in the world would they care about the detainees? Call Fei Xing over. Shen Zichuan said, I have a mission for him. Gu Qingqing was momentarily stunned, after which he said, these people, will he be willing to take it on? Since he is registered to serve in the imperial prison, Shen Zichuan raised his eyes, his gaze cold, then there is no unwilling for him to speak of. If these people cannot be useful to me, then leaving them around will only lead to disastrous consequences in the future. The imperial bodyguards had no lack of talents, but those like Gu Jin, who could scout everywhere and anywhere with just a pair of eyes and ears, were few and far between. This Fei Xing was a son of common birth born of a concubine. He was an assistant commander, one who inherited his father's original post in recognition of his meritorious services. This person was the most outstanding in conducting searches, but he was previously one-upped and overshadowed by Qiao Tianyao. He hung on until it was finally the 8th year in which he could be considered for promotion, and made many trips to Marquis Hulian's place of the same clan. He initially thought himself to be the one to assume the position of northern judge. Who would expect Shen Zichuan to appear out of nowhere? The latter completely severed his future prospects, keeping him stagnant in his original post to await orders. Fei Xing was different from Gu Qingqing. He knew more about the circuitous official circles than Gu Qingqing, who came from an impoverished family background. He could even strike up a conversation with Han Qing, who was his superior, and he could be considered half a disciple of Han Qing. So, he was not like Gu Qingqing and the likes who had a former friendship with Ji Gang. He totally did not give a damn about Ji Gang. At present, he was a heavyweight in the imperial bodyguards, one on mutually antagonistic terms with Shen Zichuan. When Shen Zichuan was at the height of his glory a few months earlier, he had lain low and did not face Shen Zichuan head-on. But friction had been gradually building up in recent days. Shen Zichuan had wasted too much time examining old cases, and half of that time was wasted on these people. They heeded only half of the instructions he handed down to them, and they were sloppy in their search and gathering of the case files. On his end, Shen Zichuan had been unable to match the records to the reign and had to personally make a trip to the Ministry of Justice before he could put it all in order. The atmosphere between both sides was already beginning to get explosively belligerent. Gu Qingqing knew they were capable, but he still choked with resentment to be compared to them in such a manner. Yet, he also understood he was inferior to them. Finding the men was now the top priority, so he did not object and rose to go call Fei Xing. Gu Qingqing lifted the curtain and walked out to see Fei Xing in another room drinking wine and playing the finger-guessing game with others. He stood beside the door and said, "Assistant Commander Fei, please make your way to the central room. His Excellency is calling for you." It was as if Fei Xing did not hear him as he stepped on the chair and shouted as he played with the others. For the entire room of people to be creating such a ruckus in broad daylight was truly a display of impropriety and disrespect. Gu Qingqing had never flared up or lost his temper at the others. He had been tagging along on missions with his old man ever since he was young, and he had seen all sorts of people. He knew how to take care of others, and he had a sense of propriety. He could make the acquaintances of even the squad commanders, standing guard, and errand runners below him in rank. No matter how uncomfortable he was at present, he would never at this time pull a long face and show his displeasure at the other party. As such, he strode through the door and grabbed the wine jar on the table to personally pour a cup for Fei Xing. He said courteously, "It's nothing major, and it's not a mission on His Majesty's order either. It won't take up that much time." Tossing the peanuts, Fei Xing said, "If it's not His Majesty's order, then just get one of the subordinates to go. What does it say of him to be singling out someone like me with rank and authority? That doesn't make sense, does it? His Excellency naturally has his own arrangements. Whether you take it up or not can be negotiated." Gu Qingqing poured a cup for himself and clinked cups with him. It has been hard on the various comrades to be checking the old cases these few days. Assistant Commander Fei has worked hard and achieved much. Here's a toast to you. Men of capabilities are always overworked. Please go. Fei Xing did not care to work for Shen Zichuan. He also boasted of being Shen Zichuan's senior, so Shen Zichuan was not qualified enough to order him around. But when all was said and done, they had to work together. He had no reason to create a scene without good cause. It would not sound good either, if news of it were to make its way to Hanqing. Fei Xing drank this cup of wine and smiled insincerely at Gu Qingqing. Without even answering him, he took his own waist token from the table and turned around to leave. Left behind and given the cold shoulder, Gu Qingqing set down the wine cup and cupped his hands to the surrounding imperial bodyguards, each of whom wearing various expressions on their faces, and left too. The moment he retreated out, his own men also stood up. Gu Qingqing wiped his mouth and said, "Why are you all standing up? There's no need for formalities between us brothers. Sit." Xiaowu, who was of similar age to Ding Tao, could not refrain from wearing his heart on his sleeve. He said in anger and resentment, "Look at his eyes growing on top of his head. He walks like a tyrant, all so overbearing and puffed up with his own importance that he has no fear karma might hit him hard in the face someday. What kind of an honorable man is he, acting all like a snob? Bah! Qingji, why do we even put up with him? Remove his token and drag him out, then cover him with a sack and bash him up. See if he still doesn't learn to behave himself." Gu Qingqing rebuked, "What insolent remarks are you spouting? If news that we beat up our own people gets out, we will be making a mockery of ourselves." He looked at every one of them and continued, "We are all attending to official duties together. We mustn't leave any misunderstandings or unhappiness festering. Otherwise, how can we all look out for each other when we are on a mission? Since they look down on us, then we'll work harder to prove ourselves." Fei Xing lifted the curtain to enter and sloppily paid his respects before the table. He still reeked of wine, the smell strong enough for Shen Zichuan to catch a whiff of it from where he was across the table. Without lifting his head, Shen Zichuan said, "Drinking on duty is punishable by a deduction from your salary, yes?" Seeing that Shen Zichuan did not get up, Fei Xing pulled the chair over. But before his ass could touch the chair, Shen Zichuan looked at him. Shen Zichuan unhurriedly let out a smile. Sit. Fei Xing could not tell what he was up to. He sat down and asked, What can I do for your excellency, since you are looking for me? Shen Zichuan replied, There's an assignment that no one else can do except you. Seeing as he had something to ask of him, Fei Xing could not help but relax. He touched the pipe in his sleeve pocket and started to put on airs, first saying, Is it a prison assignment? If it's an order from the commander-in-chief, then pass me the official paperwork and I'll be able to work on it. Shen Zichuan tapped away the excess ink on the brush tip and said, It's not a prison assignment, and it's not an order from the commander-in-chief. Fei Xing struck the flint and bit down on his pipe as he laughed and said, Then it's your excellency's order? I can do it, but I still have a mission to keep track and record of late. Isn't this just in time for the 4th month? I have to keep an eye on the price fluctuations of Kudu's daily necessities of firewood, rice, oil, and salt. The so-called keep track and record was to have the imperial bodyguards record all minor and major matters in a book, including the prices of grains, rice, noodles, and tea. These were to be reported to Li Jianheng and Hai Liangyi whenever necessary. But this assignment did not have to be personally carried out by Fei Xing. He was a 4th-grade assistant commander, and the only assignments in which he could be dispatched out were for arrests and field work. By putting it this way, he was, in truth, not planning to take on the assignment. Why use an ox cleaver to kill a chicken? Having you do that is simply a waste of talent. Shen Zichuan said, I am a person of mediocre ability to begin with. I cannot be compared to such a naturally talented hero like your excellency. You are already a 3rd-grade vice-commander at such a young age, and His Majesty looks upon you favorably. What's more, you are a man of elegance and poise. Fei Xing blew out puffs of smoke. Men like us can only do some lowly work to muddle our way through. We don't dare to dream of anything else, and we don't dare to be one either. Wait for a few days. I'll have free time only after a few days. Shen Zichuan said, This assignment cannot wait. Fei Xing moistened his dry throat and half leaned over to look at Shen Zichuan to say, Then what can I do? Each matter has its own priorities. I have to finish the task at hand before I can take on your assignment. This is the rule set by Ji Wufan back then, and I can't break it. So you'll have to wait. Shen Zichuan, having received that smoke right in his face, looked at how fearless his expression was and knocked the ashes away to the edge of the table. Capitalizing on his status, and thinking that Shen Zichuan could not keep him under control, Fei Xing slid the chair away and prepared to bid him farewell. Shen Zichuan suddenly extended his fingers to tack a slip of paper before Fei Xing and said, I can wait. But can the assistant commander wait? This year is your promotion year. But coincidentally, the Provincial Administration Commissioner of Jueshi, Jiang Qingshan, is about to enter the capital to report for work. Surely you understand the Grand Secretariat's intent by having Jiang Qingshan enter the capital at this point in time. He will be going to Zhongbua to be the person in charge, and this person lacks an Imperial Bodyguard's Inspector General by his side. So, is Assistant Commander Fei still busy? Jiang Qingshan was a provincial governor who was outstanding in his governance of the area within his jurisdiction, having forged ahead and turned Jueshi into Dazhou's granary. Li Bei's and Qidong's army provisions all came from him. This person was someone whom even Xiao Jiming and Qi Zhuyin could not afford to offend. Working for him meant that there would be nothing to worry about one's future prospects. Fei Xing could not advance any further in ranks. He had to find external help. But because he was a son of common birth born of a concubine, he could not get to play together with all the bona fide direct descendants born of the principal wives like Han Jin, Fei Shi, and Pan Lin. Without that layer of connection, he could not make his way up through the ranks. Being stuck in this position made him feel shitty all over. Otherwise, he would not greet Shen Zichuan with such biting sarcasm and mockery. Fei Xing hurriedly extinguished the pipe and rubbed his palms at the sides of his legs. He bent over slightly and said to Shun Zichuan with a smile, "Look at me, not knowing what's good for me. What assignment? Tell me." Shun Zichuan said, "I want you to turn over the entire kudu to search for 2 men. Search openly, or..." Fei Xing looked at Shun Zichuan and gradually catoned on. He said, "That's easily done. I'm good at this. Give me their descriptions, Your Excellency. 5 days. I'll definitely find them for you." Shun Zichuan lowered his voice and said, "I'm only giving you 2 days." Fei Xing looked at the slip of paper, clenched his teeth, and accepted. Chapter 86. Former Residence. Chapter 86. Former residence. Hua Xiangyi and Qi Xiu's wedding was scheduled to take place on the eve of the grain in year 1 in the 4th month. The Ministry of Rites had already submitted the drawn-up process to the Empress Dowager. The internal affairs of the palace were numerous and complex, so when it came to such a major affair, the key government offices could not afford to be lacking in personnel. Fumin originally thought himself to be the perfect candidate for the position of the Directorate of Ceremonial Seal-Holding Director. He had the qualification and experience, having attended the eunuch school too, and having been in charge of managing the affairs in the Grand Secretariat and Mingli Hall. Plus, he had Xiao Qie to vouch for him. As such, he was even more discreet and cautious as he attended to his official duties these days. Unexpectedly, when the imperial edict was issued, the seal-holding director turned out to be Fengquan and not him. Fengquan was young, and he had little experience to speak of. He had never studied in the eunuch school. What's more, he was a junior eunuch who was already over the usual age when he entered the palace. His connection to the former Pan Rugi and Ji Lei was one that could never be severed clean. To let him take on this post that was comparable to that of an inner minister, Fumin really did not know if he should cry or sigh. The promotion of an outer court official depends on his family's social standing, place of origin, and teacher or master he tutored under. I thought the promotion of us inner court eunuchs would be exempt from this hurdle of family background and status. But, damn. Fumin set down the teacup and let loose a long sigh. Who knew that we still can't cross this hurdle after all? What family background does he have? Xiao Qie listened to Fumin's grouses and said as he leisurely drank his tea, "He's only benefiting off his elder sister's glory." "Your lordship, why is it that I don't have a sister?" Fumin slapped his knee and lamented. Xiao Qie snorted a laugh and said, "If the seal isn't available, there's still the brush. The brush-holding director also manages the Eastern Depot. Old Fu, by letting him take the lead at the head of the pack, you'll get to escape the spittles of imperial censors. His Majesty's current treatment of me can't be compared to the former emperor's treatment of Pan Rugi, and the Eastern Depot isn't as influential as the imperial bodyguards." Fumin hesitated, then said, "Your lordship, looking at how favored her ladyship Mu is at present, if she were to give birth to an imperial heir in the future, then wouldn't Fengquan secure this position completely? Never mind if he is one who knows his place. I fear that he harbors an ulterior motive and ends up breaking the imperial court's laws and throwing the state into chaos. Wouldn't that make him the second Pan Rugi?" Fumin had to greet Fengquan with a smiling face in the palace, but in truth, he was jealous and sickened of him. Fengquan had Mu Ru as a backer. If Fumin, who had been supplanted by him, wanted to stand up to him as an equal in the Directorate of Ceremonial, he had to win over the outer court officials. He is young and he still has to rely on you for many matters. You often move around the Grand Secretariat, and you are a known figure to the Grand Secretary. If one were really to compare, he is merely a lad who usurps what is others. He is no one worthy of mention. Xiao Qie comforted him in his manner, then said, "With us looking out after each other from within and without, we needn't fear him. How is it going in the palace lately?" "Second young master, she is dead. His Majesty still thinks of the tune. he had yet to complete and felt sad for a few days. Fumin turned sideways to look at Xiaoqie. But your lordship, while I was serving tea to the various excellencies in the Grand Secretariat, I inferred from Minister Wei's words that he still wants to investigate the Shi clan's accounts. The Shi clan caused such a big commotion at the harbor, and there is no head of household this time. Such a big business may be likened to a piece of fatty meat. It's a gold mine. They are all eyeing it. Isn't his family still alive? Xiaoqie and Shinzichuan had discussed the follow-up plans for the Shi clan. Those keys had fallen into Shinzichuan's hands, and in Xiaoqie's eyes, these were Shinzichuan's trousseau. Biding his time, he said, Shi Hongshuan's eldest sister-in-law, and Shi Hongshuan's various cousins are all skilled in managing the business, and they have not committed any crimes. By investigating their accounts for no apparent reason, Minister Wei would be accused of hitting a man when he's down. His Majesty didn't agree. But the Grand Secretary seems, Fumin moved his arm onto the table and said to Xiaoqie, seems to have the intent to pursue the accounts too. Hai Liangyi naturally has his own considerations. The Shi clan had too much silver hidden away. Rather than let the remaining few clans divide it up among themselves, they might as well take that money into the state treasury and let the imperial court manage it. But this meant that Hai Liangyi had to fight with the noble clans head-on. The key is still His Majesty. Xiaoqie thought for a moment and said to Fumin, His Majesty is a wise ruler, and he's the most particular about benevolence and righteousness. It was only just last month that he granted a general amnesty. Wouldn't raiding and confiscating the Shi clan's properties and possessions for no rhyme or reasons this month run contrary to the original intent of the amnesty? His Majesty is also hesitating himself. Old Fu, Fengquan will no doubt go along with Minister Wei for this matter. If you go along too, then it will instead look like you're blindly going along with the flow. Why not use the opportunity, while you are serving His Majesty, to tell His Majesty in detail that it is inadvisable to go ahead with this matter at present? The gears turned in Fumin's head. He said, Won't this offend Minister Wei? Whether inside or outside the palace, there is only one master, and that is His Majesty. Xiaoqie smiled. Pan Rugi was powerful and influential too, but he did not throw in his lot with the emperor. I'm not at all surprised that he ended up executed. Besides, how can Mingli Hall tolerate tongues wagging? How would he, Wei Huaigu, know of the words you say to His Majesty? His Majesty likes people who are sentimental. You don't have to persuade for the sake of persuasion. Just mention it in passing. I shall listen to your lordship's advice. Fumin was all smiles, looking warm and affable. In any case, this money won't land in our pocket. We all might as well not want it. The Ministry of Revenue has been tabulating the Imperial Army's accounts for the medicinal herbs used at the Zhao Zui Temple for quite a number of days. How's it? Have you heard anything of it? It's been done and has already been submitted to His Majesty's desk. Nothing is wrong. Fumin knew that Liang Tsuishan, from the Ministry of Revenue who was entrusted to handle this account, had been nominated by Xiaoqie, so he said, His Excellency Liang is truly something to sort out and keep the accounts in such clear order. He could even answer readily and smoothly when the Grand Secretary quizzed him about it. Looks like he's on his way to a promotion too. Thus, Xiaoqie asked no further. When Fumin was leaving, Chen Yang gave him the new tea from Huzhou they had prepared in advance. Fumin's hands sank when he received it, and so he knew that there was something inside. He pretended to decline it, and it was only after Chen Yang repeatedly persuaded him that he finally accepted. The next day, when the court was dismissed, Xiaoqie waited outside Mingli Hall for himself to be summoned. Shinzichuan was there too. Both men stood an appropriate distance away, not too far, not too close. There are people everywhere probing into the Shi clan's properties these few days. Xiaoqie removed Longli blade and handed it to Shinzichuan, taking the opportunity when Shen Zichuan received it to hold down his hand slightly. "Your Excellency ought to move fast soon." Shen Zichuan seemed to have something else on his mind. On hearing him, he lifted Lonely Blade and said, "Yeah, he has already left Kudu and is rushing back with the coffin in tow. There should be news next month. Hailiangi is not the same as the others. He has made up his mind to take the Shi clan's family properties into the state treasury. No matter how fast your man rushes, he will still lose the advantage of the first strike." Xiao Qie found Shen Zichuan a little distracted. Thus, he released his grip. Shen Zichuan's palm sank. "Barely able to hold up Lonely Blade," he said. "No matter how fast he is, he still has to play by the rules and follow procedures." Xiao Qie cast a glance at Mingli Hall's corridor and asked, "What's wrong?" Shen Zichuan replied, "I'm looking for someone. Shifu is missing." Xiao Qie said, "As long as there is no passage document issued, he is still in Kudu. The 8 great training divisions would not dare to let people in and out without authorization during the epidemic. And the Imperial Army took over the patrol after the epidemic. If Ji Gangshifu has already left, I should have news on my end. I'm also guessing that he's still in Kudu." Shen Zichuan paused for a moment. Shi Hongxian only did what he did to take teacher away. Shifu went along for the sake of protecting teacher. He shouldn't have been held up for this long. But if teacher is still in danger, then Shifu definitely won't be able to leave on his own. Shi Hongxian is already dead. Xiao Qie turned his eyes slightly to look at the other end. "Time to get someone to check that gentleman's house." Shen Zichuan followed Xiao Qie's gaze. On that end, Xue Xiuzhua, dressed in official robes, was approaching them together with Jiang Qingshan. Xue Xiuzhua was plain in appearance, but he had a scholarly and refined bearing. He was not the same type as Kong Qiu, Sun Yu, and the likes. He was gentle towards the others, making it likely for the others to form a favorable impression of him. On the contrary, Jiang Qingshan was not what one would expect. The formidable heavyweight of Jueshi from the rumors actually looked younger than his actual age. Both of them drew close, and the 4 men greeted each other. In the past, when Jiang Qingshan came to Kudu to report on his work, he had only seen Xiao Qie from afar at the banquet of 100 officials. As for Shen Zichuan, it was his first time meeting him. But his heart was not in this, so he was neither warm-hearted nor pretentious towards them. Many old cases were closed this year, and it's all thanks to the contributions of Assistant Minister Xue and the various excellencies from the Ministry of Justice. His Majesty will surely lavish you with praises today when we meet with him," Xiao Qie said to Xue Xiuzhua with a smile. Xue Xiuzhua smiled too, shaking his head slightly as he said, "It's all due to His Excellency the Minister's perceptive and wise judgments that the cases could be closed. I merely assisted him from the side. How is it considered a contribution? On the contrary, it's Vice Commander Shen who straightened out and put those disorganized case files into order again. It has indeed been hard on him." Shen Zichuan looked at Xue Xiuzhua and said, "The Imperial Prison has an archive I can check. These matters are something that even a common clerk would be able to handle." Xue Xiuzhua's expression betrayed nothing. Other than Jiang Qingshan, the other 3 were all feigning civility. Jiang Qingshan seemed as though he did not want to get involved. He merely stood at the side and said nothing. Fuman lifted the curtain and came out to call out their names. Only then did the 4 men move together into Mingli Hall. As Shen Zichuan strode in, he instantly caught sight of Fengquan, who was serving at the side beneath Li Jianheng's dragon throne. Both men's eyes met and Fengquan smiled. Fei Xing prided himself on being number 1 when it came to conducting searches. There had never been a person he could not find. Yet, there was still no trace of Ji Gang and Qi Huilian even after he had gone through the entire Kudu these 2 days. Gu Qingqing had followed him all the way. When he saw that Fei Xing had now lost his arrogance and had been silent all this while, he asked, Is there a possibility that they have been taken out of the city? Fei Xing was serious when he was attending to official duties. Not looking at anyone, he squatted at the bottom side of the Shi clan's burned veranda and said, "Unlikely. Since one of them had extraordinary skills, then it is only by taking them down on the spot that would ensure no traces will be left behind. For this kind of matter, the more the commotion, the easier it is to be exposed." Gu Qingqing took a few steps back and surveyed this mansion with spacious halls and extensive gardens. He said, "But if he had hidden them at home, then how could it have escaped the searches of our brothers? We have long done a thorough search of this residence. Although I have never befriended or associated with Shi Hongxian, I have heard of his temperament." Fei Xing rose. He was suspicious by nature. So the more important things were to him, the more he would have kept them close to him. Because he did not trust others. Since these two men are so important, he would definitely not put them in a place far away from him. Fei Xing's voice gradually trailed off. He climbed up along the scorched wall and pushed aside the various branches to look over next door. "That's Prince Qin's manor." Gu Qingqing climbed up after him and crouched down to look inside. Deserted for many years, Fei Xing jumped down and took a few steps into the painted corridor, where he saw the paint at the top had already peeled off. It was all gray and drab all around, covered thick with cobweb. He used his Xiuquan blade 3 to pick off the cobwebs and tried pushing the doors with paper seals. For that's right. It has indeed fallen into disuse for many years. Gu Qingqing looked around. "You suspected he hid them here?" As soon Fei Xing touched the door, he knew something was wrong. He said, "A decades-old manor, yet the seals are merely covered in dust. Something's fishy." He took half a step back and abruptly kicked the door open. Author's notes. I saw someone question the need to keep considering the issue of ingots transportation instead of using banknotes outright. I'll explain it here so that those with the same question can also understand the reasoning behind this. Because I did not define banknote banks in my setting. If such a setting were to exist, then it must be able to contain Shi clan's wealth and completely be beyond the imperial court's control. It'd be considered as a self-made entity by the merchants, and therefore, it must have a high credit rating to ensure that the banknotes issued under its banner can be used. 4,000,000 taels is no small sum. Even if they were converted into banknotes, they'd still be subjected to inspection during transportation. The banknotes would also need to be protected against humidity and fire hazard. Most importantly, because they are not officially issued by the imperial court, there is no guarantee that its usage across the various lands of Dazhou will be problem-free. As an example, for this amount of money to come out of the Jueshi, it must be converted to banknotes at the banks in Jueshi, but once it reaches Zhongbo or Libei, it remains a question of whether or not the banknotes can be exchanged for the same value. If the setting were to include official banknotes, then events such as the defeat of Zhongbo troops, corruption amongst government officials, power struggles among political factions, and the emptying of the state treasury during the era of Xianda have resulted in the Ministry of Revenue being unable to audit their own accounts clearly. They would have even less capacity to issue and distribute official banknotes and paper currency. The issuance and distribution of such have strict requirements for the notes materials as well as a standardized credit limit. So even if banknotes were used, there is also no way a few banknotes could net 4 million, given the limit on credit. If we were to consider using denominations of 1 tael, 5 taels, 10 taels, and so on, the transfer of 4 million banknotes could only resolve the issue of weight. Subsequently, if the imperial court were to have a change of sovereign, or if the Shi clan were to be brought to ruins, then whether or not these banknotes will depreciate in value or render void will also prove to be another source of headache as well. Actually, there is an aspect of the Shi clan's setting I'm not sure if everyone has noticed. It's that the Shi clan controls the salterns and copper mines. The copper mines mean that they can mint their own copper coins, as long as they have a firm grasp on the relative purity standard of Dazhou's copper currency. This is the fundamental reason they can pit themselves against the rest of the 8 great clans. Besides, isn't the large amount of silver warehouses in their possession also an indication that they have, in fact, already been mining silver in private and have the potential to manipulate the flow of silver in the market? Of course, these are a few words from whatever little information I have on hand. Because I'm not familiar with the know-how in this field, I'm not comfortable with blindly adding in the setting of banknotes and bank. In the case of silver, it makes more sense to only consider the relative purity standard of silver. Many areas are problematic if we were to probe deeper into it, so thank you for your tolerance and understanding. As a result, today's chapter isn't much sorry. But now that today's matter has been dealt with, we will return to our old schedule tomorrow. Chapter 87, Imperial Air. Chapter 87, Imperial Air. The door panel fell to the ground with a loud thud, strewing accumulated dust all over. Fei Xing covered his nose and mouth and strode in to check all the corners, not missing a single one. This was the former residence of Prince Qin. Although it had fallen into a state of disrepair for years, one could still get a glimpse of its former opulence and grandeur. Fei Xing lit the candle he carried on him, extinguished the lighter, and headed into the inner chamber. The bed curtain and beddings are all new. Gu Qingqing lifted the drape and looked at the bed. There were still people staying here a few days ago. Fei Xing stopped beside the table and pushed aside the teapot cover to reveal the residual tea stains within. They drank spring tea from the Baimazu prefecture of Jueshi. Looks like Shi Hongxian did not treat them shabbily. Gu Qingqing saw the bloodstains when he inspected the bed, and his heart began to pound. He lifted the entire quilt, then took a sudden step back. Hidden under the quilt on the bed was a putrid-smelling corpse with obvious signs of livor mortis. This person had obviously been dead for a few days. Fei Xing held up the light to inspect the corpse. This person was strangled to death. Fei Xing pointed to the corpse's throat. It was crushed outright. There are bloodstains, Gu Qingqing said. He had wounds inflicted with a blade before he died. Not only that. Look at his neck. There are 2 sets of strangulation marks, which means that the first time did not kill him. How could those men Shi Hongxian hired from the martial fraternity alone be capable of forcing the Shifu into such a corner? As Fei Xing spoke, he used his blade to prop up the corpse and slowly turn the body over. There's no anomaly with the livor mortis, so he shouldn't have been poisoned. The gashes on his back are in such a mess. Obviously, a layman who knows nothing of swordsmanship had haphazardly hacked away at him. The blade missed the vital points, that's why he chose to choke him to death. They should have joined forces to kill this man. I suspect the Shifu was injured. It's likely he was too physically weak, and the teacher had no choice but to take up the blade himself as a last resort. The more Gu Qingqing heard, the more alarmed he was. He said, since the corpse could be laid out in such a neat and orderly manner, does it mean that teacher and Shifu have not reached the point of panic yet? As long as it's possible that the corpse was laid out by others. Fei Xing surveyed the place again. There are no traces of a fight here either. I think Shifu was injured and did not have the means to display his prowess with ease, that's why he needs teacher's help. But their second transfer was definitely not arranged by Shi Hongxian, because none of those martial artists he hired from the martial fraternity would dare to set themselves against the imperial bodyguards for just a bit of money. Whether or not this corpse is one of the martial artists remains to be seen. If it isn't, Fei Xing's words came to an abrupt halt. He was willing to work for Shun Zichuan because he was eyeing the lucrative post. If this matter was not a personal grudge, then it was going to involve court strife. He did not want to put himself right in the middle of it, so he did not finish the second half of his words. If it wasn't a martial artist, then this kind of highly skilled expert could only come from the imperial palace, and this corpse was possibly from the imperial bodyguards themselves. Gu Qingqing understood his concerns. Both men fell into a silent stalemate. This house was creepy and eerie, so continuing to stand here like this was not an option. Fei Xing retracted his blade and said, "They are most certainly in Kudu. Each of the officials' residences and princes' manors has specialized bodyguards to stand guard. Their doors are tightly shut, and there are secret passages built inside. It's simply too easy if they want to hide a few people. Sorry, this humble one is unlearned and of little talent. I can only search this far for His Excellency Shen." With that, he cupped his hands to Guqingqing and stepped out the way he came in. He mounted his horse and headed back to turn in his report. From where he was in his spot, Guqingqing saw that trail of blood drag all the way to the ground. So he followed the blood trail and kneeled while propping himself up on the ground to look under the bed. It was even darker beneath the bed, and there seemed to be something there. Guqingqing reached out to fish it out, but it turned out to be a handful of ashes. Guqingqing blew away the ashes, leaving only a fingernail-sized piece of paper in his palm. It was the remnants of handwritten notes that Qi Huilian had not thoroughly burned away. Shen Zichuan closed his eyes. Sandwiched between his fingers was the piece of paper that had been burned yellow. There were only a few words remaining on it, yet these were words he was the most intimately acquainted with. Qi Huilian's handwritten notes touched upon quite a number of matters. They were all treatises on contemporary politics they discussed back then in Zhao Zui Temple. Every little thing he had taught Shen Zichuan, and every inside story about the eunuchs he knew when he served as Grand Mentor, were all in the note. During the epidemic, Qiao Tianya had transferred them all to store in the loft for Qi Huilian to safekeep personally. To prevent the information in them from leaking, Qi Huilian had his own way of reading them. What treatise it was and how to read it were all something he had thought over himself during his spare time at the temple. If one were to read them in the usual order, quite the number of matters would appear to be just a jumble of words, much like the ravings of a lunatic, totally incoherent and incomprehensible. But he burned it. Was it because he was forced by circumstances, or because he was worried that the one detaining him would be able to read it? Qiao Tianyao, who had been leaning against the wall, involuntarily straightened up when he saw Shen Zichuan stepping out. Shen Zichuan swiftly walked down the steps and said, "Prepare the carriage." Noting that it was already getting late, Qiao Tianyao knew where he wanted to go. The inconspicuous and common horse carriage set off and circled twice on Shenwu Street before reaching the Plum Blossom residence. "Where is his lordship?" Shen Zichuan got off the carriage and asked. On seeing his solemn expression, Ding Tao did not dare to play around and replied honestly, "His lordship has just gone out to invite that eldest master Shui for a drink. He will return later." "Your Excellency, do you need me to go and call his lordship back? It's just a few streets away." For Xiao Qie to invite Shui Xiui for a drink at this moment, he must also be trying to probe deeper into Shui Xiuzhua. The Shui residence was not an easy one to investigate. It was far more convenient to have an insider like Shui Xiui around than to send someone to grope around in the dark for clues. Shen Zichuan walked into the courtyard and said, "You just need to tell him that I'll be resting here tonight. Tell him to come back after he's done drinking. Don't stay out all night. But also tell him there's no hurry. There's no need for him to rush back immediately. Shui Xiui is not an easy one to dismiss at will." Ding Tao uttered an acknowledgement and left. Qiao Tianyao followed Shen Zichuan and asked, "Why the sudden hurry?" Shi Hongxian didn't trust anyone, but he trusted Shui Xiuzhua. Shen Zichuan headed up the stairs under the dim light from the lantern. That last time Shi Dan defrauded him, he rather suspected Shi Dan than to suspect Shui Xiuzhua. He always had to ask about everything. Having gotten hold of teacher this time, he no doubt wouldn't dare to act on his own. Before his death, Shi Hongxian was so sure that Shen Zichuan would lose. Why? He must have known something that Shen Zichuan still did not know as yet. Shi Hongxuan's promotion to the Bureau of Evaluations was on Shui Xiuzhua's suggestion. He heeded Shui Xiuzhua's advice that much. Why would he? Shen Zichuan suddenly paused in his steps and stood where he was. The Shui clan had already been on the decline for a long time. Shi Hongxian would never comply and put himself at the disposal of a down-and-out person. He would also never be that easily won over by anyone. They came to associate with each other through the solidarity between fellow students. Because both clans were related by marriage in the previous generations, they had ties of kinship and friendship between them. But what did Shui Xiuzhua use to maintain his hold over Shi Hongxian? Shi Hongxian put profit before anything else. He could even kill his dear blood brother on a whim. It was impossible for Shui Xiuzhua to gain his trust of such proportion with just that flimsy bit of blood relationship alone. Shen Zichuan started to grow apprehensive for no reason. He looked at the eaves. The shadow was like a threatening beast, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. It had already bitten half of his body between its sharp fangs. Clues that he could not pry apart clearly were just like the dense clusters of water weeds that, along with the colors of the night, entangled and tied down his hands and legs, giving him an inkling of the danger. When Xiao Qie saw Ding Tao come in midway through his drinking session with Shui Shui that he had invited the latter to, he knew that Shen Zichuan had returned to the residence. As he socialized with the other man, he gave Ding Tao a slight nod to indicate his awareness of it. Shui Shui was half drunk again. He wanted to call a few prostitutes down for company. But Xiao Qie said nothing of this, so he did not dare to call for them rashly. Still grabbing the wine cup, he said to Xiao Qie even as his wine-induced hiccups persisted, Shui Yanqing, that batch of fledglings he is raising in the residence, he specifically put them in a big courtyard, and even habitually hire a teacher to set up some kind of private school. If you ask me, he doesn't seem like he's raising prostitutes. Is that so? Xiao Qie downed several cups of wine, showing no sign of being drunk. Beside him, Chen Yang filled Shui Shui's cup to the brim again. Xiao Qie casually clinked cups with him and said, "Then why did he buy those batch of people? There has to be a reason. There's something odd about Shui Xiuzhua." Shui Shui drank several mouthfuls of wine and continued, "If not for your lordship's reminder, I would not have noticed. The people he bought are similar in age, but they are all good-looking, with boys and girls both pleasing to the eye. I know there are quite a number of people in the imperial court who are into males. Each of those male prostitutes on Donglong Street is all delicate and supple. They are no less inferior to real women. Is he thinking that the ones sold outside are unclean, and that would easily open himself up to gossip and ridicules, so he had to raise a batch on the sly for future connection building?" Xiao Qie did not listen to him prattle on. He toasted him and said, "Then he's going to have to put in a lot of time and effort. Those popular and known male courtesans on Donglong Street only got to where they are today because of patrons spending cold, hard cash on them. He bought both boys and girls. Is the teacher he hired only teaching the boys? That's the odd thing." Shui Shui's drunken state was an ungentlemanly sight to behold. He lowered his head for a moment and finally stopped the hiccups before he said to Xiao Qie, "Your lordship, he let those girls learn music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Too, I know why. Which man wouldn't like a pretty lady as a study companion? Yet he let those boys study essays on current affairs." Xiao Qie's eyes swiftly turned to look at Shui Shui. He repeated, "He let those boys study essays on current affairs? Just that alone?" Shui Shui shook his head hard. He extended his finger and said, "He set up a small school in that courtyard. Occasionally, he would go there to teach them himself. Your lordship, do you know what he taught? They were all proper classics. Just the previous day, he was teaching these boys contemporary politics." ******. Xiao Qie returned home very late. He saw that the room was still lit, and so he knew Shen Zichuan was still waiting for him. Chen Yang dismissed the attendants serving them, leaving only a few of them guards to stand watch over the courtyard. As usual, Xiao Qie stepped inside. There was only a glazed lamp lit inside. Shen Zichuan was before the small table, looking at the cases. He had already removed his crown, and was draped with Xiao Qia's large robe, looking as he always did before he retired for the night. Xiao Qia leaned over to press down on Shen Zichuan's back, and tilted his head to kiss his earlobe. He said, "Leave a note if something's the matter. It's the same discussing it tomorrow morning upon waking up." Shen Zichuan uttered an acknowledgement and turned his head to look at him. Xiao Qia got up, removed his blade, took out his outer garment, and sat cross-legged beside Shen Zichuan. Shen Zichuan's fingertips pinched the page of the book, but he did not turn it over. He said, "Some things have to be discussed in person. It can't be clearly explained in just a word or two." Xiao Qia finally relaxed and undid his clasp. He said, "Let's take turns. You first or me first?" Shen Zichuan looked at him for a moment, but Xiao Qia did not pull him closer, so he raised his fingers to help him undo the clasp. After thinking for a moment, he said, "There are many things I have yet to wrap my head around. You go first." Propping up his elbow on the small table, Xiao Qia flipped out another book from the cabinet at the side and handed it to Shen Zichuan. As the latter read it, he said, "Of the batch of people Shuexiuzhua bought, the eldest is 18 years old, and the youngest is 14. Boys and girls, both mixing in one courtyard. The only thing they could be said to have in common is that they are all good-looking. 8 great cities: Zhongbua, Jueshi." Shen Zichuan's fingertip followed the names. He didn't look at their place of origin when he bought them. This might be to obscure the truth, so that others would have nowhere to start checking even if they wanted to. Seeing Shen Zichuan come to a sudden stop at a certain spot, Xiao Qia moved in closer for a look. "You've seen this name before?" Shen Zichuan looked at that name and said, "Ling Ting. I've heard this name before at Shangyun Villa." "They are all Shangyun's people," Xiao Qia said. "She likes smart and sharp children, that's why she used Ling as a surname and changed all the names of these fledglings. You had a drink with Shuexiui earlier tonight. Did he say anything?" "He said something strange." Xiao Qia paused for a moment. "He said Shuexiuzhua bought this batch of people back to the residence, where the girls learn all those stuff the brothels teach, while the boys attended proper school. Shuexiuzhua hired a teacher for these boys. There's not only essays on current affairs from the Imperial College, but also discourse on contemporary politics." Shen Zichuan pondered it over and said nothing. Xiao Qia said, "If he wants students, he could have picked them from decent households. There are plenty of people from the Imperial College who want to formally acknowledge him as their teacher. Yet, it is in such a way to teach the boys he bought back from the brothel. Even if these people really accomplish something in their studies, they still can't join the ranks of officials due to their lowly status. So what's in it for him? Unless he intends to raise a bunch of in-residence hangers-on." 3. Shuexiuzhua. Shen Zichuan seemed to be drifting away, lost in his thought. He listened to Xiao Qia's words and swiftly organized his thoughts. If he wants to keep hangers-on, there are better candidates. You and I missed out a point earlier. Shuexiuzhua and Shi Hongxian are on good terms. It's not like Ohua Pavilion can't afford to give him the batch of brothel fledglings he wants, isn't it? Yet, he specifically used money to buy them from Shangyun Villa. This shows that he had his sights all along on a certain someone among that batch. The images in Shen Zichuan's mind flashed past. Although he did not have Ding Tao's photographic memory, he kept every single matter and every single word from his past interactions with the others in his mind to mull over. He remembered them all. He would not forget any details. As long as the blood of the Li clan runs in him, he's the imperial heir. Grand Mentor's Qi words were like a thunderbolt that cleaved apart the current muddle in Shen Zichuan's mind. Once he thought of this phrase, he thought of many more. He abruptly straightened up in his kneeling pose, and his sleeves flipped over and messed up several pages of papers on the small table. The former Emperor Shen Zichuan grabbed hold of Xiao Qia's arm. His voice gradually calmed as he said, "The former emperor reigned for a little more than 8 years. His chronic illness went uncured, and he had no imperial heirs. The only one who got pregnant was imperial concubine Wei. During the Nanlin hunting grounds incident, the Hua clan rebelled. Hua Xiqian had the guts to make his move that night precisely because of the child in imperial concubine Wei's belly. But after that night, when we returned to the capital, imperial concubine Wei was already thrown into a well to drown. At first, I suspected you, but then later on, I suspected it to be a long-time minister from Hai Liangyi's side. They did it to completely sever the noble clan's wishful thinking and let Li Jianheng ascend to the throne smoothly. That's why they struck first to gain the upper hand and killed off imperial concubine Wei. But now that I think about it, there's something wrong with this assumption. Even if imperial concubine Wei was with child, there was still no knowing if it was a boy or a girl, for so there was no way they could pit the child against Li Jianheng, who already had the support of Li Bei. To Hai Liangyi, killing imperial concubine Wei is an unnecessary move. Going further back, Emperor Guangqing was on the throne before Emperor Xiande. The crown prince of the Eastern Palace slit his own throat in Zhao Zui Temple because of the rebellion case. At that time, the imperial grandson was still an infant. If he didn't die, he should be 26 years of age this year. However, this case was jointly handled by Ji Lei and Shen Wei. Ji Lei, in order to defect to Pan Rugi back then and show his loyalty, would surely not dare to be too sloppy and careless. So it's even more unlikely for him to leave such a big source of disaster behind. In that case, then the one in this world who can still claim to be an imperial heir could only be. Xiao Qia grasped back Shen Zichuan's icy cold hand and continued in a deep, lowered voice, "The eldest is 18, and the youngest is 14. If it's truly the imperial heir, then the only one who can match the timeline is Emperor Guangqing. The Eastern Palace was massacred in the era of Yongyi. For nearly a decade after that, no imperial concubine was able to give birth to an imperial heir right under the Empress Dowager's watchful eyes. Although Emperor Guangqing was suffering from an illness at that time, he wasn't ill to the extent he was weak and frail. Unable to break free from the Hua clan's hold over him, he could only think of a way outside the palace. Other than me, the only one who knew that Ohua Pavilion had been hollowed out beneath to be filled with jars was Shuexiuzhua. The collapse case was an attempt to kill Li Jianheng, and this is the part one haven't been able to figure out. Assuming now that he really has an imperial heir in hand, then everything else makes sense. He killed imperial concubine Wei, then tried to kill Li Jianheng. That hidden unease of Shen Zichuan was becoming more and more distinct. Xiao Qia was also daunted by this out-of-the-blue conjecture. He said, "If that is truly the case, then the imperial heir is among that batch of people." Both men faced each other. Shen Zichuan kept his voice down and said, "This imperial heir must not live." Xiao Qia pinched Shen Zichuan's chin and closed the distance between them. His gaze was deep and grave. "Lanzhao, we cannot let a single one of these people live." He spoke slowly. His intent to kill was like a raging wave buried in these depths. Both of them thought plenty in this very instant. What was the implication of the imperial heir? It implied that everything in the present will all turn passive. Would the noble clan who had the imperial heir in their grasp be easily defeated? Think about the Empress Dowager, who had ruled behind a screen for as long as 20 years. The Li clan she had in her control could only become her puppet. The power and influence of political factions formed of the aristocratic clans would surely rise again, and Hai Liangyi would once again be beaten back into a disadvantageous position. All of a sudden, the sound of knocking rang out from the other side of the door, breaking the heavy atmosphere between both men. Xiao Qia said, "Speak." Xiao Tianya said with slight urgency, "Master, the man who has been hurrying all night to catch up with Shidan is back." Shen Zichuan stood up at once, gathered his clothes together, and opened the door. Xiao Tianya quickly stepped aside to create a path for him. Shun Zichuan looked at Guqingqing, who was kneeling on one knee in the courtyard, and went down the steps. He said, "What's wrong?" "Your Excellency." Guqingqing looked up. His voice was hoarse and shaky. Shi Dan opened the Shi clan's money vault, but it has already been emptied out. The leaves on the branches in the courtyard rustled in the wind as the trees abruptly inclined their heads to look askance at Guqingqing. Moonlight smeared the ground white, as if paving it with a thick blanket of frost. In the dead silence, Shun Zichuan turned his head back a little and said to Xiao Qie, "Erlang, we've been played for fools by him." His tone was soft and gentle, but it made the entire courtyard of guards all lower their heads. Chapter 88. Imperial Preceptor. Chapter 88. Imperial Preceptor. The refreshing breeze came blowing gently, and the chilly night made one cold with fear. Xiao Qie's earlier intent to kill was largely dispelled by this Erlang. He stayed silent for a long while, bathed in this pleasant coolness as he calmed himself. Shun Zichuan looked back again at Guqingqing. Without looking the least bit flustered, he said, "Transporting this many silvers is not something that can be achieved in a short time. No matter how thorough he is, he can't deceive the entire world. Gather some men tonight to head out of the city. First, head to Qinzhou and make detailed inquiries along the way. Record down all the business transactions of the major goods in the past 2 years from Jueshi to the northeast, then send someone to give me a detailed account." Guqingqing had been heavy-hearted with worries after receiving the news. But when he saw how unperturbed Shun Zichuan was, he could not help but feel a little relieved and composed himself too. "Chun Yang." With his robe hanging off his shoulders, Xiao Qie motioned, "Take them to the Interpreters Institute 1 in Kuda first. Get a batch of medium-grade horses and affix their tags to the official writ of arrest for the notorious bandit leader. Say that the bandit is on the run in Jueshi. It's not convenient for the Imperial Army to head out of the city to pursue and apprehend him. Thus this task is entrusted to the Imperial bodyguards. I'll personally make a trip to the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Justice tomorrow morning to submit a report." The city gates were already closed, and they could not leave the city arbitrarily. The Imperial bodyguards were also involved in the important tasks of conducting raids and arrests of criminals, and they usually had to report to the Ministry of Justice and Chief Surveillance Bureau whenever they had to leave the city for fieldwork, then waited for the official approval in reply. By doing this, Xiao Qie was giving Guqingqing a reason to take the men out of the capital and to excuse him from being subsequently called to account by the Ministry of Justice. Guqingqing immediately left upon getting his order. Chun Yang threw on his robe and led the way, and both men left the residence ahead of the others. Xiao Qie led the flimsily dressed Shun Zichuan back by the hand. When he stepped through the door into the room and saw that Shun Zichuan was still deep in thought, he said, "What happened to teacher is no doubt connected to Shuexiuzhua. But since he's willing to transfer him away, that means teacher is still of use to him. He won't act rashly and kill teacher. There are too many secrets hidden in the Shue's residence. I have to think of a reason to get a special search and arrest warrant from His Majesty. To deploy the Imperial Army, it has to be a major case where the evidence is irrefutable. So we still have to rely on the Imperial bodyguards for the probe today." Shun Zichuan did not sit back in his original seat. He knew that resting would prove to be hard tonight, seeing as it was already late, so he poured himself a cup of strong tea. However, he only took a sip and gave the rest to Xiao Qie. Xiao Qie drank it all and said, "Shuexiuzhua is cautious in everything he does. He would not even accept the ice respect to those officials outside the city offered him upon their return to the capital. In all the time during his tenure as the Chief Supervising Secretary, the Imperial censors from the Chief Surveillance Bureau all regarded him as the most uncorrupted official. He rarely gets impeached. So I'm afraid it'll be hard for even the Imperial bodyguards to find a reason to investigate him. Investigating him openly with great fanfare will inadvertently alert the enemy." Shun Zichuan fiddled with the teacup and deliberated it over the bitter aftertaste of the tea. He's out in the open, while we are hidden in the dark. As long as we keep the pawn Shueshui concealed, we are still the party on the offensive. Matters outside the palace is not an issue, but we have to be even more careful when it comes to affairs within the palace. His intent to kill His Majesty has already been ignited, and he has the help of Mu Ru and Fengquan. He knows every one of His Majesty's moves and actions like the back of his hand. Under the circumstances, we have no option but to guard against him. Xiao Qia thought for a moment, then said, "Didn't Fengquan just become the seal-holding director of the Directorate of Ceremonial? Given his service record, he will surely incur censure from both inner and outer courts. Fumin, whose rank is beneath him, is itching for a fight, while Hai Liangyi detests eunuchs. Fengquan's power and authority now that he has assumed the post of the seal-holding director cannot be compared to Pan Rugi's during the latter's time in power. Get him trapped both on the inside and outside where he is unable to fend for himself, and he won't have the spare capacity to deal with anything else for Shueshui. It's also of pivotal importance to secure His Majesty's position." Shun Zichuan said. "No word regarding the imperial heir must get out. Ever since Li Jianheng's ascension, he had been castigated much by the imperial censors. What's more, he had met with mishaps and dangers one after another. He did not have an outstanding track record of political achievements, and his reputation among the commoners was not comparable to that of the former emperor. If the matter of the imperial heir were to leak, it would no doubt unsettle public sentiment. No matter which way one were to look at it, it would not be conducive to maintaining stability. Regardless of whether it's a real dragon or a fake dragon 3 in Shueshui's hands." Xiao Qia pressed against his thumb ring and stared at the glazed lamp. The Emperor of Dazhou can only be Li Jianheng. Even if a crown prince is to be designated in the future, it can only be Li Jianheng's son. The Xiao clan was now a notch above the Hua clan, and they had managed to preserve their power. Xiao Qia, secured in his position, was steadily making his moves, while Xiao Jiming, over in Libei, was solid in his defenses too. They pitted against the noble clans in Zhongbua and Qidong on the sly. The fight was not that intense, because there were the outspoken ministers Hai Liangyi and his people to act as an intermediary and mediate between them, managing with some difficulty to prevent the infighting between the two Tigers 4 from deteriorating further. But then, Hai Liangyi's greatest protection was Li Jianheng. Li Jianheng was willing to trust him and respect him. He knew of his unyielding loyalty. That's why he had not immediately turned to the Empress Dowager for support in this tug-of-war. Furthermore, Li Jianheng was willing to lay out all the major and minor affairs of the imperial court on the table to discuss with Hai Liangyi. This was the fundamental reason why Hai Liangyi could secure his position in the Grand Secretariat as the Grand Secretary after the move into the new reign. The person Li Jianheng was not important, but after he ascended to the throne, Li Jianheng became crucial. He was in the center of all the covert and overt attacks, and he was the cage the three sides jointly used to restrain the other. He was also the dagger the three sides jointly used to attack the other. Now that Shueshui had already surfaced, Shun Zichuan could not help but wonder, even as he looked for a breakthrough, if there was another person behind Shueshui. There was a drizzle a few days later, when Shueshui had the day off. He was wearing a sky-blue fine-woven silk robe as he paid a formal call on Qi Huilian at the small building he was in. Qi Huilian took large bites of his meal and did not even cast a glance at him. Shueshui did not sit at the table, and the bow he made was a protocol observed by pupils. He saw Ji Gang sitting before the window polishing a stone, and so he said to those in attendance, "Elder Ji has yet to recover from his injuries and should avoid spicy food. Go and get the chef from Duanzhou to cook up the dishes again. No need for the trouble." Ji Gang blew away the dust and said in a quiet voice, "I'm not eating." Shueshui did not say a word, and the attendant withdrew to give the chef his instructions. The Shui clan was a prominent clan of the city of Jincheng, and they were not used to the local tastes of Zhonghua. This chef from Duanzhou was someone he had hired specifically for Ji Gang. The drizzle outside the building came pitter-pattering amongst the apricot blooms in spring, and the pink and white in the courtyard were all beaten to mud by the rain. Having eaten and drunk to his fill, Qi Huilian wiped his mouth and rose to look at the bleak scene in the courtyard. He said, "No need to waste that effort. Ji Gang is extremely obstinate. If he says he's not eating, then it means exactly that. Just get them to prepare some steamed buns and pickled vegetables for him to allay his hunger." Shui Xiuzhua smiled. "I can't be so irreverent with both elders in my house as guests." "Then open the doors." Ji Gang carved a nose and eyes for the stone. "We can go back ourselves." Without a change in his expression, Shui Xiuzhua said, "There's a chill in the spring air lately. Seeing as Vice Commander Shun still has nowhere to settle down, how would he be able to provide proper accommodation for both elders? Drop the pretense. Just say that you're keeping us in captivity." Qi Huilian walked a few steps, and the iron chain on his ankles clanked along with his movements. He said, "I've been taken prisoner my entire life, and I'm almost reaching my end. I'm old and he's disabled. What are you trying to do by holding the two of us old, weak, sick, and disabled men captive in your hands?" Shui Xiuzhua personally bent over to pick up the chopsticks Qi Huilian had pushed aside to the ground. Wiping it with a handkerchief, he said, "Mr. is a brilliant man of great stature in the past. You originally would have enjoyed the posthumous honor and glory of being enshrined and worshipped by the imperial ancestral temple after death. A pity you threw in your lot with the wrong person, and ended up feigning insanity in Zhao Zui Temple for 20 years. Today, I would like to ask of Mr. to be the imperial preceptor once again. Firstly, it can make up for Mr.'s regret for not being able to witness the Crown Prince's enthronement ceremony back then. Secondly, it can redress the injustice and grievance Mr. has suffered and allow Mr. to begin afresh in the imperial court. You can return before the eyes of the masses in a dignified and above-board manner. Aren't these 2 reasons sufficient enough? I am a person who respects and admires Mr. Be the imperial preceptor again." Qi Huilian took a step backward, dragging the iron chain along with him. A laugh escaped his throat. "You want me to be the imperial preceptor again? Such arrogance! The world is now at peace, and the current emperor is rightfully legitimate. He has that high rincher to watch over him and assist him, so why do you still need me, Qi Huilian? I'm crazy and silly. There's no way I can assume an important post." Shui Xiuzhua set down the chopsticks and said, "Mr. ended in such a situation only because Mr. was slandered. During the reign of Yongyi, the Empress Dowager took control over the state affairs, which turned the law and discipline of Dazhou's imperial court upside down and caused corrupt officials to run amok. It was the same during the reign of Xianda. Hua and Pan colluded with one another and stirred up troubles in Kudu, the 8 cities, the entire Dazhou, bringing untold suffering to the common folk of the various lands. Then, the troops of Zhonghua suffered a defeat, and it was a scene of desolation and despair in the 6 prefectures as victims and refugees swarmed all over, and bodies of the starved littered the roads. Mr. spent an idle 20 years in Zhao Zui Temple, yet you have lost your drive and heroic spirit now that you have come out. Have you even lost the will to compete and emerge victorious against Hai Liangyi?" Qi Huilian turned around and held on to the window to look at the rain pelting the apricot blossoms. After a moment of silence, he said, "It's true that I wanted to compete with Hai Liangyi 25 years ago to determine who was the better one. We both took the same imperial examinations. He was so unremarkable, while I ranked first in the imperial civil examinations at the provincial, metropolitan, and palace level. 5 I was complacent in my youth and did not know how to navigate the official circles. I ended up framed and demoted out of the capital. Too ashamed to face my elders in Yuzhou, I fell depressed for several years. Later on, Hai Liangyi was promoted, and he rose in rank. Yet, the crown prince did not take him as his teacher, but welcomed me back to Kudu from Yuzhou. And so, I became the grand mentor of the Eastern Palace. At the same time, I assumed the post of Minister of Personnel. Hai Liangyi lost to the name Qi Huilian his entire life. But he is a gentleman. When the crown prince slit his own throat, he was condemned by all. Only Hai Liangyi believed that there was still hope in him, that he was not beyond redemption. Just for this alone, I cannot be compared to him. Between us, there is no superiority or inferiority, only mutual appreciation. But alas, heaven is blind. Even though we share the same path, we still cannot work together. I've been trapped for 25 years. You're right. At present, I no longer have the will nor desire to compete with him. Shuexiuzhua fell silent too, leaving only the sound of rain and of Ji Gang carving and polishing in the room. The rain intensified, and the apricot blossoms fell in an even more chaotic manner to form a blanket of fragmentary pink among the muddy water. In this lifetime, I've only taught 2 people, and both times, I imparted all the knowledge I have learned over the course of my life to them. I thought too highly of my talents and was unwilling to make do, and it was precisely of this conceitedness that I caused such great harm to my first student. Qi Huilian gazed at that dirty water with pieces of petals, as if he was looking at his own down-and-out half of his life. He said, I, Qi Huilian, am not an immortal after all. 2 students are enough. As for the others, I'm not up to teaching them. Ji Gang burst out coughing violently. He covered his mouth with a handkerchief and grumbled, Close the windows. Qi Huilian shut all those scenes outside and looked back at Shuexiuzhua. He said, That's all I have to say. Don't pester me. Leave. Don't stay and get in the way. Shuexiuzhua did not move. His appearance did not resemble Shuexiui. He did not even look to be a noble clan's descendant. He lacked the same kind of haughtiness Pan Li and Fei Shi had. His identity as a son born of a concubine had given him a lot of grief the past decades, and it subsequently polished him into a person of unobtrusive but sophisticated elegance. I admire Mr.'s talents and learning, and I look up even more to Mr.'s philosophy on the world. I have come thrice to this small building to beseech Mr. to come out of obscurity to return to officialdom, all because I understand Mr.'s aspirations. Mr. Hai Liangyi is indeed a lofty gentleman, but a gentleman has never been able to coexist for long with a man with petty interests. The current emperor is not given to accepting guidance from the classics, and he doesn't have the benevolence to treat worthy men and men of virtue with due respect. He is merely a straw everyone grasps on to as Dazhou teethers on the brink of collapse. There is no way he can be a wise and virtuous ruler. How much strength and energy does Hai Liangyi still have left in him? To entrust the safety of the state entirely on him alone is a complete reversal of hierarchy and an overlook of the more important issues at hand. Qi Huilian said, To begin with, it's the minister's duty to assist the sovereign in governing the state. Hai Liangyi is doing his best to save the situation from declining and to mediate between the various parties. He's a loyal subject. Don't tell me you still want him to be a traitor, one who replaces the Li clan and brings about a regime change? The conflict between those from the noble clans and those of humble backgrounds has been going on for hundreds of years. To get rid of this age-old societal ill, one must have the determination to commit oneself irrevocably and fight to the very end. Shuexiuzhua rose to his feet and said, If Li Jianheng can't do it, there are still others. Dazhou is the empire of the Li clan. As long as the Li bloodline still exists, then it's only reasonable to have a change in person in order to tide over this crisis. Qi Huilian's point of view was at odds with him. So he merely treated him as a noble clan descendant abusing his power for personal gains and refused to engage further in a conversation with him. Shuexiuzhua stood in silence for a moment before he said, Mr. and I are also both kindred spirits on the same path. It's a pity Mr. doesn't believe me. But I still have to tell you that Shun Zichuan is a vestige of evil who drags out his feeble existence nursing his hatred. There is nothing else in his heart, he merely exists for revenge. He acts with viciousness, and he is narrow-minded. He is poles apart from the crown prince. Mr. teaches him with the heart and mind of tutoring a sovereign, and this is no different from helping a villain commit evil. Even if he makes great achievements in the future, he still won't be a good master. Ji Gang slammed down his carving knife without warning and glared furiously at Shuexiuzhua. He said, "How much do you understand Chuan? You people keep calling him a vestige of evil, but the way I see it, all of you are the insatiably greedy vestiges of evil. Shut your trap and leave." Shuexiuzhua bowed and said, "I'll be waiting, should Mr. have second thoughts." He exited and left after letting down the curtain. Shuexiui was wandering outside the courtyard when he saw Shuexiuzhua walking back from afar. He cradled the umbrella close and made his way to the veranda, only to bump into the students who had been dismissed from school. These students, who came from the brothel, paid their respects to him. Shuexiui tossed the umbrella to the maidservant behind him and looked at them one at a time. The maidservant said, "Is this the path for you people to walk on? How impertinent of you all to get in the way of the eldest master." The students hung their heads down and retreated. A girl of 17 or 18 stood behind them. Shuexiui noted that she was extraordinarily good-looking, so he tugged her sleeve frivolously and said, "Are you one of the chicks Yanqing bought back? What's your name?" This girl cast a glance at Shuexiui without answering. Shuexiuzhua just happened to approach from the other end to block Shuexiui. He said with a smile, "Did eldest brother just come back? Let's return to the courtyard. The rain is heavy. Careful not to get drenched." Shuexiui slapped his hand away and said impatiently, "I know." Shuexiui took a few steps and heard the students behind him pay their respects in unison and addressed Shuexiuzhua, "Teacher." He turned his head back again for another look, only to see that girl earlier looking right back at him with her head inclined to the side. Her gaze showed no fear or trepidation. Even after Shuexiui discovered her looking at him, she did not avert her gaze. Instead, she looked at him until Shuexiui could not help but turn his head around first. The wind and the rain pelted his face. Shuexiui shivered and hurried away with his arms wrapped around himself. Chapter 89, Thunder. Chapter 89. Thunder Guqingqing had been out of the capital for a little less than half a month. The Shi clan's money vaults that were opened one after another all turned up empty, but the good thing was that the stores in the various regions could be managed by Shi Dan. Coupled with the 4 million silvers he had gotten earlier, Shun Zichuan did not end up totally empty-handed with nothing to show for. The 2 million that had been transported via the Northeast Provisions bridle path in the 4th month had already arrived at Sizhou. When the letter was delivered back to Kudu, it was directly handed over to Shun Zichuan right from Ding Tao's hands. Shun Zichuan wiped his sweat. Before he opened it, he waved to Xiaoqia, who was similarly drenched in sweat. Xiaoqia took off his clothes and went inside to take a bath. He said from the other side of the screen, "Just read it out to me." Shun Zichuan read out the letter. Xiao Jiming had been brief and concise in his message, which was that the silver had arrived in Sizhou without a hitch, and the army provisions for Li Bei's armored cavalry this summer and autumn had also arrived at the warehouse. Jiang Qingshan was transferred to Zhongbua to take up the post of the Provincial Administration Commissioner of Zhongbua. Then was this batch of army provisions prepared by someone else? Xiaoqia took a quick bath. As he wiped himself, he said, "It was jointly prepared by the Assistant Administration Commissioner of Jueshi, Yang Qing, and the subordinated vice-prefects along with the various Jueshi vice-magistrates. They are all old hands under Jiang Qingshan's command, and they are the fastest when it comes to the past preparation of the military provisions." Shun Zichuan set down the letter on the desk. He wanted to say that since it had not been through Jiang Qingshan's inspection, then the military provisions should still be properly inspected before distribution. But he thought the better of it when it came to his mind that Shao Qie was not managing Li Bei's military affairs. Shao Jiming should know the ins and outs of this matter. There was no need for an outsider like him to interfere, so he dropped it and did not bring it up again. Shao Qie draped on a dark-colored wide-sleeved robe over his inner garment. He could hold his own against these solemn colors. Even with it hanging loosely over his shoulders, he cut an imposing figure. He drank a cup of tea that had gone cold when he came out and said, "Gu Jin went to the Shui residence to check it up last night. Teacher and Shifu are most likely detained in one of the loft. Common places aren't able to trap Shifu." Shen Zichuan touched the brush. "I want to see it for myself. If someone as vigilant and wary as him were to discover it and transfer teacher and Shifu to another place, then we will be looking for a needle in a haystack." Shao Qie removed the crown for Shen Zichuan. "I've already called for men to take turns to keep the periphery of the Shui's residence under surveillance. We have to think of a safer method. There's still one thing I can't figure out." Shen Zichuan let Shao Qie comb his hair for him. That clumsy back and forth was not at all like the second young master. How exactly did he empty out the Shi clan's money vaults? Gu Qingqing did not find out anything in Qinzhou either. Shao Qie cast a glance at Shen Zichuan in the mirror and said, "Can't figure it out? I already did." Shen Zichuan looked at him. "We know that 4 million silvers you got are all subjected to inspections at the various regions' checkpoints as long as they are transported through a trade route, regardless of whether it was by land or water. He must have this concern too, so there's no point checking the trade routes." Even as Shao Qie spoke, his hands did not remain idle. He weaved a little braid the width of a finger for Shen Zichuan and slowly continued. "The governmental posts Shui Xiuzhua holds in successive order are all important positions. A chief supervising secretary audits the accounts in the various regions, and when it's close to the banquet of 100 officials, he no doubt has to have dealings with the transport office. The transport office is responsible for the management of the local taxes paid out to the imperial court. It can't get any more convenient for him to enter and exit Kudu if he smuggles the silvers in between." Suddenly enlightened, Shen Zichuan asked again, "Then where did he hide them?" "Although the Shui's residence is larger in scale than the Shi's residence, it's not of a real heritage as the Yao clan. Even if he dug into the ground, he can't hide that much money. That depends on how exactly he wants to use them." Shao Qie released his fingers, and Shen Zichuan's black hair cascaded down like water. It was soft to the touch and totally lacking in aggressiveness. He pressed down on Shen Zichuan's shoulders from the back, and both men appeared in the mirror. He said, "His hometown is in the city of Jincheng, and down south is the prefecture of Hezhou. Hezhou's waterways are developed and are dominated by the Yan clan, who have business dealings with the Shi clan's boats in the harbors of Jueshi. Now that he has kicked off Shi Hongxian, he will have to find someone who can play around with money as well as Shi Hongxian if he wants this money to start moving once more. And this person is none other than the Yan clan of Hezhou. So, my guess is that he most likely entrusted these silvers to the Yan clan of Hezhou." Shen Zichuan had never been to Hezhou before. All he knew was that the Yan clan of Hezhou was very capable. They were not like the Shi clan where legitimate sons born of the principal wife ruled the roost. What they counted on was capability, regardless of whether one was a son of lawful birth born of the principal wife or a son of common birth born of concubines. During the first year in the reign of Xianda, the Yan clan made a fortune trading in tea in Hezhou. They rarely went near Kudu other than to pay tribute. Shen Zichuan knew very little of them. Second young master's braids are all so prettily done. Even as Shen Zichuan was thinking, he did not forget to look askance and poke fun at him, truly an erudite man of many talents. This second young master has braided many a number of them. Shao Qie teased him. Aren't Lang Tao Shuijin's little braids pretty? I was the one who braided them all. Shun Zichuan said, I put all my heart and soul into saving up the betrothal gift for you. Yet you regard me as Lang Tao Shuijin? Shao Qia lowered his body and gestured to the mirror, a horse, HM. There were all sorts of expressions in Shao Qia's eyes. Pressing against Shun Zichuan like this made Shun Zichuan remember the debauchery of the last time they rode the horse on a rainy night. His smooth neck no longer had those love bites, yet it had already learned to blush when Shao Qia whispered into his ears. Shun Zichuan lifted his chin slightly, completely exposing the arc of that exquisite, jade-like neck. It was like a crescent moon in the dim light, not that sharp and innately smooth and lustrous. He softly asked, Am I? Shao Qia fell under his spell. He kissed the corner of Shun Zichuan's eye, then stared at the man in the mirror and said with a smile, Would I bear to? You're the master of me. I only want to take you riding. Shun Zichuan's anxiety that had persisted for days on end dispersed some. When he smiled, it carried with it a hint of seductive allure that even he himself did not notice. The temperature in Kudu suddenly rose in the 5th month. They had not even enjoyed the refreshing coolness of spring to their heart's content when that summer heat came assaulting them in the faces. The subordinate officials could not take sedans as they went about their tasks, so each of them lifted their robes and fanned themselves. They were drenched in sweat as they entered and exited the various office compounds, with the blazing sun already causing their lips to peel and faces to redden. Liang Cuishan had only gotten some free time after receiving a succession of promotions owing to his audits of the Imperial Army's accounts. He was now working under Pan Lin, the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Revenue, handling the task of auditing the various regions' taxes. Pan Lin was now overwhelmed with gratitude towards Shao Qia. This was because not 2 days after he returned home the last time, Li Jianheng really granted his father, Pan Xiangjie, a pardon for his offense. He was not banished to the frontier. Instead, he only received a salary suspension pending observation and was excluded from this year's inspection. Shao Qia had never recommended and vouched for Liang Cuishan for promotion in public, but they were all astute people who knew that Liang Cuishan was someone Shao Qia had recommended before the emperor. So even though Shao Qia did not give any prior notification, Pan Lin still took good care of Liang Cuishan, sparing him from Wei Huaigu's reproach. It's the grand wedding of Hua and Qi next month. We have to familiarize ourselves with the processes the Ministry of Rites sent over, and the various expenses all have to be clearly calculated in case we can't give a flawless answer when the Empress Dowager asks about it after the wedding banquet. Pan Lin drank the green bean soup. He was so hot that his back was thoroughly soaked. Pan Lin was much younger than Liang Cuishan, but he joined the imperial court earlier, and his rank was high, so even if Liang Cuishan did not address himself as this humble subordinate before him, he had to address himself as this pupil. Liang Cuishan was feeling hot too, but they were in the office compound, and they had to pay attention to officials' etiquettes, so he could not strip off his robe as he liked. Otherwise, he would be chastised if he were to encounter the imperial censors from the Chief Surveillance Bureau. He dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief and said with a nod, This humble subordinate shall heed your Excellency's instructions. I will not dare to forget a single amount in this account. Pan Lin gave him a few more instructions on the other matters. He still had to go to the Ministry of Rites to verify some details, so he stepped out to get on the sedan and left. Having owed a debt of gratitude to Shun Zichuan and Shao Qia for their recognition and appreciation of his worth, Liang Cuishan never dared to be shoddy in his work and so promptly set about reconciling the accounts. He sat for only a moment when he heard someone outside barging in. It was midday at present, and there were not many people around. Liang Cuishan hurriedly went down the steps to greet the person. Seeing as this person was an unfamiliar face, he asked, Brother, who are you looking for? This person was sweating profusely as he shoved an entire document to Liang Tsuishan. He said, "This humble subordinate is an official from the Northeast Provisions Bridle Path Postal Relay Station. Your Excellency, this is an urgent report dispatched from Jueshi's prefecture of Baimazu the night before. It comes with the authentication tally from the Provincial Administration Commission of Jueshi. This is a matter of extreme urgency. Northeast Provisions Bridle Path." The moment Liang Tsuishan heard this name, he knew it was a major matter which concerned Li Bei. He accepted the stuff and said in an urgent voice, "Why deliver it to the Ministry of Revenue? All the matters from Li Bei are considered military reports and should be delivered to the Ministry of War. This is an urgent report dispatched from Baimazu." This person said, "It bears the tag of the Ministry of Revenue. Your Excellency, please present it to the minister's desk quickly. The consequence of delaying this express relay report is not something you and I can bear." Liang Tsuishan promptly headed inside with the document under his arm and hurried over to the place, only to turn up empty. But while he did not see Wei Huaigu, he saw Wei Huaigu's attendant. The attendant accepted the stuff, but took his time and told Liang Tsuishan to go back first, saying that there would be arrangements made for it later. Liang Tsuishan intuitively sensed a problem. How could an express relay report be handled so flippantly? They were clearly stalling for time. His heart pounded hard as he retreated out. But instead of returning to the office compound, he turned around, lifted his robe, and ran to where the imperial bodyguards were on duty. It was scorching hot all the way there. Liang Tsuishan was panting hard when he arrived. Without even daring to drink a mouthful of water, he hurried into the courtyard and requested to see Shen Zichuan. "What's the matter?" Qiao Tianya let him in. "Why did Your Excellency run all the way here?" "It's an urgent matter." Liang Tsuishan could hardly care to explain to Qiao Tianya. When he saw Shen Zichuan upon entering, he hurriedly said, "Your Excellency, this humble subordinate has something to discuss with you." Shen Zichuan got Qiao Tianya to serve the tea. Setting aside his official affairs, he said with a fixed gaze, "What's wrong?" Liang Tsuishan did not dare to sit. He exerted himself to take a breather and said, "This humble subordinate received an express relay report dispatched from Jueshi's prefecture of Baimazu earlier at the Ministry of Revenue's office compound earlier. It concerns the Northeast Provisions Bridle Path. This humble subordinate delivered the report to the top, but never got to meet His Excellency the Minister. This stuff is inextricably connected to Li Bei. Your Excellency, I fear something has happened to the military provisions sent to Li Bei last month." Shen Zichuan immediately rose and said, "Head over to the Imperial Army's office compound and inform His Lordship of this matter. Take my horse. Say that the Imperial Bodyguards is on official duty and spur the horse all the way there. The military provisions concern Li Bei's war affairs this year. If Wei Huaigu was indeed delaying reporting this to the higher-ups, then there must have been a slip-up somewhere that he alone could not shoulder the responsibility for. Although the preparation for the military provisions was handled by the prefecture of Baimazu in Jueshi, the overall inspection had been carried out by the Ministry of Revenue. This sweltering heat was abnormal. It was only the beginning of the 5th month, yet it felt just like the great heat. The sun was still scorching at midday, and by the afternoon, the weather had turned overcast and windy, looking as if a rainstorm was fast approaching. Wei Huaigu had sat on the chair for an entire hour. His back was already soaked through. He felt dizzy, having already finished reading that postal relay report much earlier. Several times he wanted to speak, but he could not bring himself to say a word. Eventually, he steeled himself, abruptly rose to his feet and said, "Prepare the sedan. We're going into the palace." Xiao Qia had not even dismounted yet, and the bean-sized raindrops had already come pelting down. Meng stopped on his shoulder. Just as he was about to enter the city, he saw Xiao Tianya galloping towards him. Xiao Tianya had not reached him when Ding Tao also came spurring his horse over from the other end. He tumbled off the horse's back and said in a quivering voice, "Your lordship, something bad has happened. We received a military report earlier, which says that the Hanshi tribe had trespassed into our territory the day before yesterday and encountered the hereditary prince on the eastern mountain range." The hereditary prince, Ding Tao's tearful voice rose. The hereditary prince is severely wounded. We've been defeated. Xiao Tianya abruptly reined in his horse. Sudden thunder detonated in the sky, blasting apart the darkness cast by the billows of gloomy clouds. Rainwater came pouring down in torrents. Xiao Qie was still on his horse. For the first time, he had on a dazed expression, as if he did not understand what Ding Tao meant. In nearly 30 years since Xiao Fengshu established the Libei armored cavalry, Libei had never suffered a defeat. Even when Xiao Jiming led his troops of light cavalry to pursue and attack the Hanshi tribe for several hundred li in the past, he had been able to retreat from the desert unharmed. Xiao Qie had never thought that his eldest brother would be defeated. Never. Chapter 90. Veteran General. Chapter 90. Veteran General. Heavy rain splashed on the water puddles. Xiao Qie's horse had already dashed its way to the palace entrance. Red silk umbrellas emerged one after the other from the small sedans, all of them sheltering important ministers of third grade and above. The Minister of War, Chen Zhen, made a special point of being a tad late to wait for Xiao Qie at the foot of the vermilion steps leading up to the palace hall. When he saw Xiao Qie coming forth in the rain, he said, "Suen, listen to me. There is no army in this world that is invincible. A defeat is a teacher that will guide one towards another victory. Jiming has been fighting with the Biancha's Hanshi tribe for years. He's also human." Chen Zhen, who had some friendly relations with Xiao Fengshu, spoke abruptly without preamble. Yet, Xiao Qie understood what he meant. Xiao Qie nodded at him with an expressionless face. He ascended the stairs together with Chen Zhen and proceeded to wait outside Mingli Hall to be summoned in. The rain soaked his shoulders, and it was in this way he stood there, shunning even the faintest of light from the lanterns. The umbrella at the back suddenly shifted to shield Xiao Qie. Shen Zichuan held up the umbrella and stood side by side with him. Standing next to each other with both of their red robes drenched by the rain made them look like demonic fiends of the rainy night. About a moment later, Fumin lifted the curtain and paid his obeisances to the group of court officials outside and called out to summon them in. Hai Liangyi went in first, followed by the various ministers from the Grand Secretariat. Then it was Xiao Qie's turn. Even Shen Zichuan himself could not follow him in. Xiao Qie did not move. He remained fixed in position for a spell and looked at Shen Zichuan. There were too many subliminal emotions contained in this gaze. In this very instant, he turned from a valiant and vicious hound into a lone wolf that had strayed from the pack. Shen Zichuan wanted to caress Xiao Qie's cheek, but he could not do so at this moment. They stood still for a long time under the shadows of this forbidden palace's walls, wearing shackles invisible to the eyes. Xiao Jiming was severely wounded, and there were no other valiant generals within Libei's borders. This was an indication that after tonight, Kudu must appoint a new general to Libei to take over the mantle from Xiao Jiming. But this person would not be Xiao Qie. Qi Zhuin's remarks a year earlier turned out to be prophetic. She warned Xiao Jiming that the Libei armored cavalry needed a new general. Owing to the excessive concentration of military power, the Libei armored cavalry could only take after the surname Xiao. Once the banner of the Xiao clan fell, the constitution of the Libei armored cavalry would be greatly undermined, making it hard to sustain their glory. The grandson heir, Xiao Sun, was only 6 years of age. If Xiao Jiming was out of the picture, then the Libei armored cavalry's only successor was Xiao Qie, who was in Kudu. However, Kudu would never release him, not unless the princess consort of the hereditary prince, Lu Yizhi, entered the capital with grandson heir, Xiao Sun, to replace him as hostages in this power struggle. In acting willfully, Xiao Qie had been merely counting on his powerful connections, much like a fox exploiting the tiger's might. But at this moment, he once again plunged into a ravine where he could not act on his own volition. The thought of going home roared like mad in his heart. But all he could do was to gaze like this at Shun Zichuan. Other than Shun Zichuan, no one else would understand. "Your lordship," Fumin urged him on in a whisper. Xiao Qie moved his feet and entered. The Ministry of Revenue assigned officials over for a check before the military provisions were escorted via the Northeast Provisions bridle path. Since there was a problem, why didn't the Ministry of Revenue report it? Sun Yu was the first to take issue with it. He did not even have time to write the memorial and simply stepped forth to interrogate Wei Huaigu outright. When the express relay report arrived at Kudu, it was delayed for an entire 2 hours. If we issue the recall order now, we have to brave the rain to speed all the way there on a route that isn't easy to navigate. By the time it arrives at Libei, it would have already been 4 days later. "Wei Huaigu, you're going to get people killed." Wei Huaigu said nothing. He was just like a statue tonight as he kneeled on the ground in a daze without even disputing a word. The moment Xiao Qie entered, the hall fell silent. The veteran ministers either hung their heads low or held their forehead. The sound of the rain outside was noisy, but the suffocating heat inside was even worse. "Sun." Li Jianheng made as if to speak when he saw him, but then he hesitated. Eventually, he merely said, "Take a seat." Xiao Qie did not sit. He bowed and said, "This humble subject has only just dismounted and does not know the details. What happened in Libei? What the hell? Such a major matter, and nobody told the Marquis." Li Jianheng flung the memorial. "Wei Huaigu, you tell him yourself." Wei Huaigu lowered his head and said without looking at Xiao Qie, "Something went wrong with the military provisions that were transported to Libei last month. According to the relay report of Yang Qing, the Assistant Administration Commissioner of Jueshi Provincial Administration Commission, these military provisions have been mixed with moldy substances. It was distributed after arriving at Libei, and subsequently, thousands of people fell ill the night before. Who would still dare to look at Xiao Qie in the eye? The Xiao clan fought wars at the frontier, and they had performed a tremendous meritorious service 5 years ago in coming to the Emperor's rescue. The Biancha Hanshi tribe was the toughest of the lot to battle against, and the entire northeast area was guarded and defended by Xiao Jiming alone. They imprisoned the Xiao clan's youngest son in Kudu, and yet they let his battle-scarred eldest brother, who fought hard with his sweat and blood, eat moldy and rotten grains. So how would they still dare to look Xiao Qie in the eyes at this time? Without turning a hair, Xiao Qie said, "The military provisions were prepared by the Provincial Administration Commission of Jueshi." Yang Qing knew there was a problem. Why did he wait until the military provisions arrived at Libei before he dared to mention it? He's the Assistant Administration Commissioner of the Southwest, and he has no grudge or enmity with Libei. Why would he risk his head to do something like this? The officials from the Ministry of Revenue triple-checked the military provisions, and the official reports that were sent back all stated that they were new grains from last year. But now they have all become old and moldy grains. They are all minor officials of low grade. Why would they do that? The military provisions arrived at Libei via the Northeast Provisions bridle path, and the Libei armored cavalry steward supervising the granary also had to check before distributing them. The multiple layers of arrangements involved for such a large batch of moldy goods to make its way into the mouths of the officers and soldiers at the frontier pass this easily can only be described as methodical. The more he spoke, the more his words increased in gravity. The Libei armored cavalry has guarded the pass for 30 years, and the troops deserve punishment for their defeat. But I'll only say one thing to everyone present here. A minor defeat of Libei is a loss for our Xiao clan, but a major defeat of Libei is a crisis for Dazhou. For several years, The Hanshi tribe has been pacing back and forth around the Hongyan eastern mountain range. What they are waiting for is an opportunity. When the troops of Zhongguo were defeated, the Hanshi tribe deployed their horses to launch an assault. They brought the cavalry of the rest of the 11 tribes and fought their way right outside the gates of Kudu without any let-up. It has just been a mere 5 years, and the page has already been turned on the tragic massacre of the 6 prefectures of Zhongguo. We have yet to avenge our national humiliation, and we are going to allow our own people to add another strike to it? The moment Xiao Qie said his piece, the color drained from the faces of everyone present. He was blunt in his words. He had come here tonight to raise hell and take someone to task for this matter. Someone played dirty tricks on the military provisions, and they want to dismiss him with that same old trick of bureaucraties? No way. He would go all out on a killing spree, and he would pursue this case relentlessly. Everything else be damned, he wasn't going to play nice with any of them. The military provisions were adulterated, with new grains substituted with moldy ones. It's no doubt inextricably connected to those at the bottom of the supply chain who resell the grains at a profit. A few years earlier, Zhongguo was in short supply of grains, and many merchants who stockpiled the grains made a killing from this. It's just that I never expected there to be officials and merchants still in collusion with one another to do such unconscionable deeds in spite of strictly enforced laws in place nowadays. The Minister of Justice, Kong Chiu, said, "If we can't carry out a thorough investigation of this matter, there we will not be able to give the various generals of Libei an explanation. This humble subject requests a joint trial by the 3 judicial offices with the imperial bodyguards to launch a search and investigation from Baimazu to Kudu. We must get to the bottom of the matter. Not only that, there's another matter that needs to be urgently attended to." The Minister of War, Chen Zhen, cast a glance at Xiao Qie and said, "The military provisions for Qidong 5 commanderies similarly comes from Baimazu. We must dispatch an urgent report immediately to Commander-in-Chief Qi. This batch of grains should not be distributed further down the line." "How are we going to make up for the shortage?" Xiao Qie's tone was icy. "These 2 batches of military provisions are the entire hoard amassed last year from the 3 great granaries of Jueshi. Now that you are recalling them and rendering them useless, how is the military provisions shortage going to be filled? And from where are you going to supplement them? If the shortage cannot be filled within 5 days, Libei and Qidong will have to fight wars on empty stomach. It's a question of feeding hundreds of thousands of people. Borrow and transfer from Huaizhou, Hezhou, and Xizhou. The receipts for the loans shall be borne by the imperial court. This matter is critical. The state treasury can't take out that much money at such short notice to buy. We can only promise to exempt these 3 prefectures from taxes for approximately 2 years." Hai Liangyi said in a steady and unhurried voice. "It's only with all the grains from the 13 cities that Baimazu was able to afford these 2 batches of military provisions. The 3 prefectures the Grand Secretary mentioned cannot be compared to it. Besides, these 3 prefectures are separated and far away from one another. One preparing and coordinating the grains to be escorted and transported will also take up several days. Tell Qi Juin that Qidong's military provision is reduced by half this year. They still have military fields to sustain them, so they still have extra resources. Hezhou leads straight to Qidong, while the grains from Xizhou and Huaizhou have to be transferred tonight." Although Hai Liangyi was still sick, he was still clear-headed in his arrangements. The hereditary prince is wounded. It's inadvisable for him to remain for long at the front line. And the Prince of Libei is ill and is similarly indisposed to head out for war. Chen Zhen, draw up a name list of commanding generals and hand it to me an hour later. Within 3 days, Kudu must send a capable officer to Libei to take over its military affairs. Hai Liangyi took charge of the situation and gave the final word. There was no doubt that Wei Huaigu would not get away this time. Xiao Qie did not intend to let him off. He did not directly go straight for him at this juncture only because the redeployment of the commanding general was a far more important issue at present. Wei Huaigu was behaving a little oddly tonight. He kneeled where he was, never once explaining to vindicate himself even after a long time had passed. Mingli Hall's side room was brightly illuminated, and the officials who had withdrawn from the court all gathered here. Hai Liangyi could not bear cold winter nights, so Kong Qiu draped an overcoat over him. He gathered the coat around him and gestured with his hand to motion for everyone to take a seat. I will send the impeachment memorial to the Grand Secretariat tomorrow, Sun Yu said. Just how many incidents have the Wei clan been caught up in? His Majesty is mindful of showing mercy, so Wei Huixing's incident the last time did not implicate Wei Huaigu, and he wouldn't admit his fault for what happened with the public ditches back then. And what about the military provisions this time? He can't escape blame for negligence and dereliction of duty. Being an official in the imperial court has nothing to do with one's familial background and standing. When it comes to attending to official duties for the sovereign, don't keep using a person's surname to find faults with others. If he makes a mistake, then impeach him if you must. Hai Liangyi had yet to drink a drop of water tonight. He looked at Xiao Qie and said, "The hereditary prince has been leading the troops for several years. Since he was able to kill his way out of the heavy siege and return to Libei, his life is not in any danger. There is no need for your lordship to be anxious. If there is anything in shortage in Libei, Kudu will work through the night to allocate and transfer it." Xiao Qie had already understood what Hai Liangyi meant. To maintain the status quo, Hai Liangyi would not let Xiao Qie return to Libei, no question about it. Xiao Jiming was defeated, but he was not dead, and even if Xiao Jiming died, Xiao Qie still could not return home, because there was still Xiao Fengshu. There are countless decent generals in Kudu, but those who can adapt to Libei are few and far between. The Hongyan Eastern Mountain Range is close to the desert, and we are about to head into the Great Heat 2 period in the 6th month. The frontier is brutally hot. I'm afraid it'll be unsuitable if we dispatch an officer who was born in the southwest. Xiao Qie sat on the chair, facing an entire room of veteran ministers, yet he was extremely calm. He reacted quickly, to the point he could be described as unassailable. He preemptively examined the case of the military provisions and told Hai Liangyi that it was fine to deploy a new general to Libei, but it had to be someone who came from Libei or Qidong. He did not want an armchair strategist who was all talk and no action. Hai Liangyi nodded approvingly at Xiao Qie. At this point in time, one should indeed not be swayed by personal feelings and act impulsively for private gains and power. It was an indisputable fact that Libei lacked a commander to lead the troop. A deputy general who was skilled in warfare like Zhao Hui was formidable too, but they were all men whom Xiao Fengshu personally taught. They were originally meant to take on the tasks to coordinate and assist. It was fine for them to lead a troop of soldiers to outflank the enemies, but it was not enough to convince the masses if they were to lead Libei. But ever since the reign of Xianda, Dazhou had been faced with a dearth of able generals. Of the 4 great generals, other than Zhuo Qianqiu, the rest all had their own important duties to attend to. The abundance of talents further down were all high-ranking military officers from Qidong. They were all core members of the warfare squad whom Qi Yuan single-handedly trained from scratch. It was Qidong's military affairs that they were familiar with. To lend out any of them to Libei was easier said than done. Besides, the Qi clan was about to enter a marriage alliance with the Hua clan. If a Qidong's general were to manage Libei's military affairs temporarily, then this would break the status quo again, resulting in one clan rising in dominance and making it hard to hold them in check. Who to assign? Even Hai Liangyi's head hurt to think about it. As they burned with anxiety inside, Fumin, who was outside, suddenly hurried in and said, "Your Excellencies, look who's here?" Xiao Qie turned his head aside and suddenly rose to his feet. The entire hall of people followed suit and stood up too. Hai Liangyi stepped forward to greet and welcome the person personally. The man who took off his overcoat revealed his white hair, greeted Hai Liangyi, and then looked at Xiao Qie. This humble one raced through the night to hurry over to Kudu and to seek an audience with His Majesty for no other reason than the matter of Li Bei. There was a lump in Xiao Qie's throat as he said, Shifu. However, Zhuo Qianxiu did not make conversation with him. Instead, he said to Hai Liangyi with a smile, "It has been many years since I last saw the Grand Secretary. I hope you are still in good health?" Hai Liangyi heavily gripped Zhuo Qianxiu's wrists and said, "As old as Commander Zhuo may be, can you still serve the country?" Zhuo Qianxiu let out a long sigh and answered, "Although I am not how I once was back in the prime of my life with this aged face and gray hair, I still have the strength to draw a bow and shoot. There's no need for the Grand Secretary to worry. My purpose for coming here this time is to, firstly, temporarily stand in for Jiming to manage Li Bei's military affairs, and secondly, deliver a message from Xiao Fangxiu." The entire room of people listened with rapt attention. Zhuo Qianxiu looked at Xiao Qie with a deep, profound gaze and said resolutely, "The might of the Prince of Li Bei has reverberated like a tiger's roar through Hongyan Mountains for more than 10 years. His son has been defeated, and as his old man, he wants to personally reclaim victory from Mu or 4 of the Hanshi tribe." The rain thundered, and the gerfalcon let out a long cry as it circled among the dark clouds of Kudu. 10 millions of li 5 away, the military flag of Li Bei flapped in the wind. Among the thick and heavy ink-colored rain, Xiao Fangxiu, who had not stepped into the battlefield for decades, put on his armor and hung up his blade to lead the troops out to battle. The wind swept up Xiao Fangxiu's cape, and he took off his incongruous bamboo hat. "Amur!" Xiao Fangxiu's voice was deep. He raised his arm in the rain to let out the raptors of Li Bei, and laughed aloud into the wind. "Li Bei has drawn a demarcation line in the east, so what are you people trespassing over for? I've told you decades ago that Hongyan Mountain is the turf of my Li Bei armored cavalry." His voice reverberated through the rain. The armored cavalry behind him, cloaked under black armors, drew out their blades in unison, their thick, oppressive might like a creeping behemoth opening its eyes in the rainy night. Chapter 91, Li Bei. Chapter 91. Li Bei's Zhuo Qianxiu came just in time, leaving no chance for Kudu to send out a new general. Thunder Sinking the Jade Stage was known far and wide for his military achievements. He was the great general after Silver Spear of Snow Pass, Feng Yixing, and he was also Xiao Jiming, Qi Juin, and Lu Guangbai's senior. It had been many years since he left Tianfei Watchtower. He had no private troops. Plus, he was also a child from a humble background that Ji Wufan, the imperial bodyguard's commander-in-chief during the reign of Yongyi, adopted. He had no family background to get in the way. His willingness to come out of obscurity to lead the troops was something Hai Liangyi could not ask for more. As Zhuo Qianxiu waited for Li Jianheng to summon him, he stood with Xiao Qie under the eaves to watch the rain. "This entire journey has been a rush, so I didn't bring any message for you." Half of Zhuo Qianxiu's overcoat was wet, all because he had never stopped the entire journey to rest except to change horses. He slowed his tone and said, "Jiming has already returned to the camp, and a military medic has been arranged to take care of him. Don't worry." But Zhuo Qianxiu omitted the extent of Xiao Jiming's injuries. Xiao Qie partially lowered his head, then asked after a moment of silence, "What injuries?" Zhuo Qianxiu gazed out into the rainy night and said, "There are some words that you and I can only say while standing here. Jiming's food had been tampered with. Even Zhao Hui fell for the trap. The squad of soldiers dragged their sick bodies to the battlefield and just happened to encounter Amur, one who is the toughest of the lot to battle. Jiming received 3 slashes. It was Zhao Hui who tumbled off his horse and carried him on his back, while leading the 10 or more remaining soldiers to break out of the siege." Xiao Qie clenched his fists. There was darkness in Zhuo Qianxiu's eyes as he said with a cool head, Jiming has fought battles in the past while bogged down with ill health. He fought for so many years. He may seem to be fine on the surface, but in truth, he's already plagued by old ailments. This time, he could be said to have hurt his constitution. Using this opportunity to let him rest for half a year will permit him to recuperate and build up his strength again. That might be the case, but Zhuqianqiu had taught the two brothers, and he could not be any clearer about their temperaments. Xiao Jiming was soft on the outside but tough inside. He did not inherit Xiao Fengshu's extraordinarily strong and healthy physique, nor had he inherited Xiao Fengshu's uncompromising hard-nosed approach. Whatever he lacked, Xiao Qia had it all. Perhaps someone else might be jealous, but Xiao Jiming cherished his family. He had the princess consort of Li Bei's compassion and benevolence ingrained in his nature, so he had never harbored the thought nor intent to trample upon his younger brother. He saw himself as a sanctuary for them and did all he could to self-heal his own wounds. All these years, he never uttered a cry of pain. Lu Guangbai repeatedly said before that he was human, but at the same time, even as he retained his human desires, he forced himself to become the guardian of Li Bei. Still, it was Xiao Jiming's half a lifetime of honor and glory that the military defeat this time destroyed. It was at this moment Xiao Qia abhorred his cage to the max. His wounds, as he struggled against his shackles, hurt the more he ground against them. They had already turned bloody. His gaze followed the raindrops and landed upon the ground, where the water puddle bore the weight of his silent agony. He braced himself and calmly said, "The meals in the military are all prepared by our own in-house errand runners. Dage consumes the same food as the common soldiers. Harming him means harming thousands of men in the camp. We cannot drop this matter. I want them to pay with their lives. Those in charge of the meals have already been executed." Zhuqianqiu looked at Xiao Qia. It was Jiming's idea. Li Bei had to bear such a grave grievance, yet they still reported it as military provisions adulterated with mold instead of premeditated murder attempt. Xiao Jiming broke out of the siege with sustained wounds. He hung on until the moment before he fell into a coma to give the order to execute those errand runners, all to prevent others from investigating under the charge conspiracy to murder. A deliberate attempt to murder suggested a power struggle. Lifting the veil away would only muddy the situation. It was all too easy for Li Bei to be used by someone as a weapon. With Xiao Jiming's retreat, the appointment for a general for Li Bei's troops would fall into Kudu's hands. Who could guarantee that the person who added in the poison was the real murderer? It was not unheard of to kill by proxy. Besides, assuming the moldy grains and poisoning were just the first steps, then if they reported the murder case and the imperial court could not find the perpetrator, the noble clans, in their denunciations, could distort the facts and falsely incriminate them for stooping to deception by using Xiao Jiming's injuries and defeat to get Xiao Qia back. You did well too. You didn't tell them you want to return to Li Bei to rally the forces and attempt a comeback. Zhuqianqiu revealed a despondent expression. If you had spoken frankly and fought for Li Bei's military power before the emperor, then their guilt tonight would have become machinations. It would also put His Majesty on the alert and set the stage for future troubles. I expect that the Grand Secretary will not set me free. Xiao Qia forced himself to pull himself together. It's as Shifu says. Fighting for military power will only make His Majesty afraid, and I still have 20,000 men in the Imperial Army in my hands. This is a big taboo. What's more, stirring up troubles and making unreasonable demands at this juncture will hold up Li Bei's military affairs. Shifu coming here has helped me out of my predicament. When I have my audience with His Majesty later, I'll discuss the dispatch issue of the military provisions with the Ministry of Revenue and Grand Secretary in detail. I'll have to get on my horse and head back at dawn tomorrow morning at the very latest. Your father has waged war with Amur at the eastern mountain range. He's launching a frontal assault first. No matter what, we have to knock their momentum down. This was not the place to talk after all, and Zhuqianqiu stopped after discussing a little about the military situation. He merely said, "It has been a long time since I last led the troops. I'll have to familiarize myself with the military affairs as soon as I can on my return to the camp. Libei is different from Tianfei Watchtower. Libei armored cavalry is skilled in storming the enemy, while I used to be on the defensive back at Tianfei Watchtower. I have to discuss this properly with your father. And one more thing. Zhao Hui is also seriously injured this time. He only has a younger sister who married into Kudu left in his family. To remember to get Chen Yang to go over the Ministry of Rites later to let them know that all is well." Xiao Qia nodded his head in acknowledgement. Just then, Fumin came to invite Zhuqianqiu inside. Zhuqianqiu took one last look at Xiao Qia and said, "You're alone in Kudu. Take good care of yourself." Xiao Qia performed the disciple's bow to him, and Zhuqianqiu strode forward and lifted the curtain to enter. Fei Xing got his wish these days to handle matters at Jiang Qingshan's side. Something had gone wrong with Jueshi's military provisions tonight, and Jiang Qingshan, who still held the post of Provincial Administration Commissioner of Jueshi, had to make a trip to Mingli Hall to discuss the matter and would not be out for at least a couple hours. Fei Xing's old ailment acted up again. Wanting to rest for a moment in the office, he sent a junior eunuch to get him some food. Fei Xing was sitting on the chair with one leg propped over the other to wait when he suddenly heard a sound from the door. He took a look with help from the candlelight. Seeing that it was Han Qing, he hurriedly got up to pay his respects. Han Qing, who had just arrived after braving the rain, motioned for him to rise. Fei Xing went up to remove the overcoat from Han Qing. Han Qing asked, "Has His Majesty summoned them to ask about it?" Fei Xing knew he was asking about something else, so he replied in a deferential manner, "Commander Zhua is here." Zhuqianqiu. Han Qing was taken aback and blanked out for a moment. He lives up to his name as the Prince of Libei, with reactions so swift that others are not given the opportunity to exploit any openings. With Commander Zhua's appearance, there will be no other candidate in Kudu who can surpass him. This Libei armored cavalry is still the armored cavalry of Libei. Fei Xing concurred but did not continue the topic. He knew that these were not matters he could involve himself in, so he would stay for as far away as he could. Han Qing knew what he was thinking and held him in contempt for that. Those Shu sons born of concubines were all like this. They had no guts and no spunk. They eyed the bit of carrot dangling before them all day long, but made no attempt to forge ahead. But while this was how Han Qing thought, he still instructed Fei Xing with an amiable countenance. Although this matter is somehow linked to Jiang Qingshan, it is still not a job he handled after all. The higher-ups won't blame him for this. Following him is indeed a good path that will open up opportunities for you. He is heading for Zhongbua next month. In the future, when the Imperial bodyguards head there for fieldwork, they will all have to rely on you to pave the way for them. Shaoxing, work hard and do your best. Fei Xing hurriedly responded in the affirmative and saw Han Qing out. As he lowered his head to lift the hem of Han Qing's robe for him, he suddenly saw the corner of the robe stained with some grayish-black dirt. He instantly patted it away quickly for Han Qing and fawned on him, saying, "Did your Excellency come over on foot?" How Han Qing unexpectedly yanked over the corner of his robe. Fei Xing's voice promptly came to a halt. Outside, the heavy rain poured, and the play of shadow and light from the candle sunk Fei Xing's face into the darkness. In that very instant, the office fell so silent that one could hear a pin drop. But in just a blink of an eye, Fei Xing raised his head and squeezed out a smile as if nothing had happened. Obsequiously, he said, "The smudge of mud has already been wiped off. Your Excellency, please be careful on your way out." Han Qing stared at him and slowly released his grip on the corner of his robe. He smiled along with him and said after a moment had passed, "You may go about your business." The moment Han Qing had left, Fei Xing's face turned cold. He lifted his hand and looked carefully at the residue of dirty mud on his fingertips under the candlelight. There was wood ash mixed within, and the rainwater had turned it into such a sludge that the color was hard to make out, but the bit of red mud mixed up with it did not escape his eyes. The Shi's residence had been burned down, and the dye the Shi clan had used happened to be imported red clay. This stuff was valuable and hard to get. Even a prince's residence was not as this capable as the Shi clan. Other than the Shi clan, there were no other clans in Kudu who could use it. What was Han Qing doing at the Shi's residence at this time? Fei Xing wiped away the mud on his fingertip. The cold sweat on his back had broken out earlier when his eyes had met Han Qing's. He stood under the light with his thoughts in disarray, but he was sure of one thing. Han Qing's intent to kill him had already been ignited in that one exchange of gaze. The next day, Zhuo Qianxiu returned to Li Bei on horseback. Shao Qie accompanied Hai Liangyi to send him out of the city. He could not return home, but he could deploy Qin Yang and Gu Jin out to follow the grains distribution officials to Huaizhou and Cizhou to supervise the military provisions. Nothing must go wrong with the military provisions this time. Shao Qie could not trust the men from the 6 ministries. He had long planted Wang Xian in Cizhou. Then he had gotten Pan Lin to transfer Liang Cuishan to Huaizhou. This way, he would not miss a single detail of the overall planning for Li Bei's military provisions. When Liang Cuishan returns, Shao Qie, who had not slept for the entire night, wiped his face with a cold handkerchief and said, "I'll have to convey to him my proper thanks." Shun Zichuan sat in the carriage. He had not slept last night either, having stood guard over the hall. On hearing him, he said, "I have already made arrangements to settle his family down in the residence. Someone will be on night patrol to watch over them, just so he can do his job with peace of mind. Huaizhou differs from Cizhou. It has no dealings with us, and now we are getting them to prepare the military provisions at such a brief notice. Huaizhou prefectural prefect must be feeling rather reluctant. Huaizhou is exempted from handing over military provisions for 8 years. The reason Hai Liangyi considered them is that they can afford to do so." Covering himself with the handkerchief, Shao Qie leaned back against the carriage wall and continued after a moment's pause, "We have to arrest Wei Huaigu today. We can't let him land in the hands of the Ministry of Justice." They had friendly relations with the Minister of Justice, Kong Qiu, and they had a good time drinking wine together the last time too. But this bit of friendship could not be compared to Hai Liangyi. Shao Qie had already given up the idea of beating around the bush with him. He wanted to sever Wei Huaigu's retreat route, so he could only make this case bypass the joint trial by the 3 judicial offices and have it end up in the hands of the imperial bodyguards, that is, Shun Zichuan. Wei Huaigu. Shun Zichuan fiddled with the waist token that had been set aside on the small table. He thought for a moment with a solemn expression, then said, "Since he had already intercepted the express relay report, it means that he does not want it to make its way to the Emperor. Yet, he changed his mind at the last minute. There must be a reason for it." Shao Qie recalled Wei Huaigu in Mingli Hall last night and said, "He was indeed acting abnormally last night. Going by his temperament, he should be trying every means possible to pass the buck or pick a scapegoat from the Ministry of Revenue to take the blame. But not only did he not try to wrangle his way out, he even answered when asked." Shun Zichuan's fingertips stopped with a thud. He said, "It's true that Baimaza had a bumper harvest last year. Now that the military provisions have been adulterated with substandard grains, then where did such a big batch of grain go?" Shao Qie pulled off the handkerchief. Clutching it in his hands, he said, "It's having designs on wealth that causes loss of life. If these grains were to set out from Baimazu via Hezhou's waterways, then it would be able to bypass Kudu to lead directly to Zhongbua, where they can brand it under a merchant's label and sell it out at a high price as grains for the common folk." There were already rumors before the new year that Jiang Qingshan was going to Zhongbua to assume the position of Provincial Administration Commissioner. If someone were to make much of this matter, then it's clear what's going on. Shen Zichuan raised his eyes to exchange gazes with Xiaoqi. Someone in the Provincial Administration Commission of Jueshi has been colluding with the wealthy merchants to resell the military grains at a profit. Because Jiang Qingshan was there in the past to oversee the entire operation and to strictly check the provisions, they carried it out on a small scale. But this year, Jiang Qingshan was going to be transferred out of Jueshi, and he entered the capital after the new year to report for duty. He had to undergo the judicial process of vetting and waiting for a review trial, so he had no way to supervise Jueshi's preparation and coordination of the military provisions, and this gave the other party an opening to exploit. It's just that no one expected them to be so bold as to dare to use moldy grains as substitute. Those who can take this much grains are few and far between. The expression in Xiaoqi's eyes was deep and unfathomable. Without their own caravan of traveling merchants to conduct the transaction, no one would dare to touch it. Shi Hongxian, Shen Zichuan said slowly. Shi Hongxian, Xiaoqi said with certainty. He died not because of you and me, but because he had already become a sacrificial pawn who could implicate others. Wei Huaigu tried every means to make Shi Hongxian take the blame in the collapse case. Was it because both of them were already dealing in private to resell military provisions for profit, and Wei Huaigu was worried that Shi Hongxian would be subjected to rigorous checks? That was why he wanted him dead? Shen Zichuan contemplated it over for a moment, then said, "That's right. Shi Hongxian had indeed said before that Wei Huaigu did it for the money." The fact that he agreed back then to give Wei Huaigu money so quickly shows that he knew Wei Huaigu's character very well and thought that Wei Huaigu would do this. If that was the case, Shi Hongxian is already dead. Wei Huaigu had no need to take such a big risk to continue doing this. I suspect this wasn't done by Wei Huaigu this time. Someone got a handle on him because of the earlier deals. That was why he knew he had already been treated as a tool when he saw the relay report. There was no escape for him now. Given how he did not argue back to vindicate himself, it's very likely he knew who the other party is. He's trying to imitate Hua Xiqian at this moment, by using his life to prevent the Wei clan from suffering further losses. Listening to the sound of rain in this interval of political intrigue against one another, Xiaoqi felt a tinge of exhaustion washed over him. Xiao Jiming did right. Li Bei's timely execution of the mess cooks was precisely to prevent themselves from being used as a pawn and becoming a stepping stone for the others to eradicate dissidents. No. Maybe not just a stepping stone. They indeed wanted to use this military defeat to reduce Li Bei's military power. They wanted to break up the Li Bei armored cavalry, which had always been in the hands of the Xiao clan, and hand it over to Kudu to control and command. This way, even if they could not take down Li Bei immediately, they could still create the effect of supervision by an army inspecting censor, thereby restraining and holding the Xiao clan in check. If commanders had not arrived in time tonight, Shen Zichuan held Xiaoqi's hand and looked at him in this cramped carriage. Then the appointment of Kudu's new general would have been issued this morning, and the Li Bei armored cavalry would no longer be the Li Bei armored cavalry. Xiaoqi's hand was icy cold. It took him a long while before he lifted his hand to stroke Shen Zichuan's hair. He said in a hoarse voice, "Li Bei armored cavalry is the armored cavalry of Dezhou. Father personally established it with his own hands. It's far more important than my eldest brother and me. For so many years, Kudu doesn't understand that we serve as an impenetrable fortress in Li Bei. We are not treasonous traitors." Chapter 92, Anxiety. Chapter 92. Anxiety. The sky was already dark when the rain stopped, with a few thin rays of fading light leaking out amongst the thick clouds. Black boots that came and went trampled on the water on the ground, sending them splashing, with the puddles reflecting the fractured dome of heaven. It was clearly the beginning of summer at this moment, but Kudu still seemed to be soaking in the rainy season. It had already been days since the capital last saw clear skies. Having only gotten some free time now, Hailiangi sat on the Taisher chair and drank strong tea. He was old, and it was hard for his spirit to keep up. He was already feeling fatigue. But there were officials moving all around him attending to their duties, and the document-exchanging hands also needed his perusal and approval. He was not at liberty to rest. Secretariat Elder Kong Chiu took a temporary rest from the cases on his desk and said respectfully to Hailiangi from where he was seated below the ladder, "The Ministry of Revenue must be held responsible for the incident with the military provisions this time. This pupil has already submitted the request for the joint trial by the 3 judicial offices to His Majesty yesterday. This matter can't be delayed. What do you think if this pupil gets started on the arrest tonight?" Hailiangi was slow to answer as he stirred aside the tea foam. He looked at the window and only said after a long time had passed, "I've been sitting for so long it makes me tired. His Majesty is still having his meal at present. Come with me for a walk outside." Kong Chiu personally took Hailiangi's overcoat from the junior eunuch and put it on for him. Both men walked out of the office. It was already dark outside. Kong Chiu carried a lantern and followed Hailiangi along the small garden of the office compound. "You want to arrest Wei Huaigu, and there is nothing wrong with it." Contrary to expectation, Hailiangi felt a little more comfortable bathing in the night wind. He took a few more slow steps and said, "This incident concerns the stability of the frontier. You mustn't be too lenient with Wei Huaigu. Just handle it in accordance with the law." Kong Chiu guessed that Hailiangi still had something to say to him, so he lit the way for Hailiangi. Already changing his form of address, he said, "I shall do as teacher says." This pupil thinks the same too. He's so audacious this time that it won't work even if the Empress Dowager wants to shield him. This pupil can see that he's been increasingly acting out of line this year. Someone should have given him a warning a long time ago. Military affairs are not like other governmental affairs. This matter must never be tolerated and condoned. That the Prince of Libei put on his armor once again to head into the battlefield is an admonition to Kudu. Hailiangi stopped. He could no longer see the light between heaven and earth. He stood still in silence for a long while before he said, "Xiao Fengshu is the alpha wolf. In the power struggle between Libei and the Hua clan all these years, he has never once stepped out of Libei due to ill health. He watches Xiao Jiming exhaust himself mentally and physically, and watches Xiao Qie trapped in the imperial city. He places both of his sons in dangerous circumstances. Why do you think he did that?" Affected by Hailiangi's tone, Kong Chiu subconsciously grew more heavy-hearted. He said, "Concession. The Prince of Libei is making concessions with his sons. The long-standing noble clans have established themselves into a fortress in Kudu, and he broke the rule from the frontier. Perhaps he once had the opportunity to advance, but he retreated. Yet the Empress Dowager didn't understand." Feeling physically and mentally exhausted, Hailiangi said, "The Empress Dowager didn't understand, neither did Wei Huaigu or the noble clans. Xiao Fengshu broke the rule, and he backed off not because of fear, but because he was willing to accede to the sovereign-subject relationship between Dazhou and Libei. But as they say, things will reverse in the opposite direction when they hit their limit. To chasing after the Xiao clan this urgently to beat them down is like urging Xiao Fengshu to turn back. Since time immemorial, power struggles have always been unavoidable. But when it comes to wars, it's often an ominous sign that the situation is hopeless. The Zhongbua troops suffered a defeat in the era of Xianda. Back then, the entire imperial court was full of corrupt officials who trampled upon the governmental affairs and made a mess of it. We have now regained the mess, and we are in trouble both internally and externally." Hailiangi coughed in the wind and refused Kong Chiu's attempt to support him. "It's only this year that the state treasury has the spare resources to bear the expenses for the local aid relief. Jueshi did good and lived up to expectations by settling the military provisions issue for the two great armies. With Li Bei and Bianjuan commandery stable, and with capable minister Jiang Qingshan about to be transferred to Zhongbua, there's hope for Zhongbua's revival. The Imperial College is on the rise, and scholars from humble backgrounds are gradually increasing. The Chief Surveillance Bureau has Sun Yu to lead it, and of the up-and-coming talents, there's Yu Xiaozai. His Majesty also no longer indulges in having fun. Sorrow gradually washed over Hailiangi. I initially thought that a new dawn was about to begin in Dazhou, yet I now increasingly find myself in a situation where my spirit is willing but my flesh is weak. Alarmed, Kong Qiu forcibly held Hailiangi to support him. His eyes reddened and he said, "Why does teacher speak of such demoralizing words? The Prince of Li Bei is absolutely not that kind of person. This pupil will preside over the trial this time. I will definitely not let Li Bei suffer this injustice. There is still a chance to turn things around." However, Hailiangi did not pull himself together. How far can this emaciated body still walk, while holding up Dazhou? He was just one man who could not save the situation on his own, much like one log alone could not prop up an entire building. He differed from the others. He could not act as recklessly and unscrupulously like the noble clans, nor could he turn completely to Li Bei. He was the Grand Secretary of the Grand Secretariat, and the one he supported was Li Jianheng. He had to make a decision that would maintain the balance in the given situation. Even if this decision might lead him to complete annihilation, he still must do it. Li Bei's fury has already been ignited. Xiao Fangxiu is now urging his troops on to Hongyan Eastern Mountain Range, but once the war subsides, he will no doubt turn back to settle this score with Kudu. Hailiangi calmed down amidst the sound of coughing. When the time comes, no matter how he rages, we mustn't release Xiao Qie, even if Li Bei is willing to use princess consort of the hereditary prince, Lu Yizhi, and grandson heir, Xiao Sun, in exchange for him. He placed both sons in dangerous situations with the intent to toughen them up all precisely for this day. Xiao Jiming is severely wounded, and this is just the time for him to lie low. Xiao Qie made a name for himself in his youth, and Xiao Fangxiu put him in Kudu to temper him for 6 years. Now that this blade is forged and his glory is known, letting him go back will be sowing the seeds of future disaster, much like releasing the tiger back into the mountain. I'm already at this age. Baran, I can't hold out for much longer. We have to treat Li Bei well, but we still can't let go of the rope we tether them with. I know that there will be many people lambasting me for being decrepit and muddle-headed after my death. But Baran, who dares to tell it to my face that Li Bei will really not rebel? That Qidong will really not rebel? Even if the Xiao Fangxiu of today can endure it, can a Xiao Qie who takes over the commander-in-chief seat someday tolerate it? Dazhou cannot afford to stake it all on this. I will take responsibility for deciding what should be given to Li Bei. Not a single item will be lacking. This time, Wei Huaigu had the audacity to resell the military provisions for profit. You go ahead and behead him in accordance with the law. Whoever pleads for mercy, I will remonstrate and impeach him. Kong Qiu voiced his acknowledgement. Hailiangi paused for a moment to brace himself before he continued, I'm going to send a letter to the Prince of Li Bei to do away with the need for the army inspecting censor. 3 This time, the imperial court will not assign an inspection eunuch to stir up trouble. All major and minor military affairs of Li Bei will still be managed by the Prince of Li Bei himself. Kong Qiu hesitated for a moment before saying, I am afraid the Empress Dowager will not agree to do away with the army inspecting censor. Is there no emperor in Dazhou? It is a century-old rule that the harem should not interfere with government affairs. It's not up to her to decide this time. Besides, fighting a war is no joke. What's the use of sending a few castrated eunuchs who only know how to fawn on others? They are just a waste of food. Hailiangi took a few more steps and continued, the eunuchs are all personal attendants of the Son of Heaven. The The 24 yamen could be called the inner court. Having resided for long deep in the palace, they know not of the sufferings of the people, nor do they understand the ways of the sages. Pan Rugi was an eunuch who had attended the eunuch school, but all he did was to frame loyal, upright men and bring harm upon the state. A wise man foresees and mitigates risk. The eunuch faction has only just been eliminated, we mustn't give them any more opportunities. I'll get Shenzhen to draft the memorial now. Submit it to His Majesty tonight. Fumin came looking for them with a lantern in hand from the other side. He did not dare to approach them and merely paid his obeisances from afar and said in a solemn voice, "Secretariat Elder and Your Excellency the Minister, this way, please. You have been summoned to the hall." Hai Liangi answered in a muted voice. He did not look kindly upon Fumin either. Kong Chiu supported him by the arm and walked back with him. Only when he was this close to Hai Liangi's body did he realize just how skinny the Grand Secretary had become. He felt a stab of sorrow and grief in his heart, although his expression gave nothing away under the darkness. Xiao Qie retidied his robes and crown and entered the hall once again. This time, Xue Xiuzhua was also present, with a spot at the end. The case of the military provisions is of grave importance, and it involves the collusion between officials and merchants for illegal profits. It's a bad influence on the local officials. If it can't be dealt with promptly and severely, then those scums will only take it for granted and have no regard for the law. Having smoked his pipe outside, Sun Yu curbed his impatience and said, "Your Majesty, I request to start the investigation and prosecution tonight. First, apprehend Wei Huaigu into the penal prison and have someone keep an eye on the Wei clan's account books and manners. We can't let them take advantage of the disorder to transfer away the ill-gotten gains." Li Jianheng had also been hanging on for a day and a night, and he was now so tired he could barely open his eyes. He managed with some difficulty to nod his head and said, "The military provision is a major issue. He made a mess of matters. Whether he should be executed or have his properties sealed, the Grand Secretariat may just deal with him at its own discretion and as it deems fit. The reach of this case stretches so far and wide that even Jiang Qingshan has to remain in his post pending the trial. Plus, the Wei clan is a large clan with an extensive business empire. I'm afraid it can't be done within half a month with the Ministry of Justice acting alone on its own." Xiao Qie's thumb rubbed the space between his thumb and index finger gently, and the thumb ring slowly rotated. He said, "Likewise, the joint trial by the 3 judicial offices epidemic case is still pending. To strictly guard against the emergence of similar official-merchant collusion cases elsewhere, the Chief Surveillance Bureau still has to free up personnel to head down and check the accounts of the various areas. Seems to me that everyone has their own difficulties and are similarly short on manpower." "Your lordship has a point," Xue Xiuzhua continued in a soft voice. "But everything has its own importance and urgency. Li Bei is fighting a war at present, so the matter of the military provision is of top priority. The Ministry of Justice and the Chief Surveillance Bureau naturally have to put this matter first. It's not an issue at all." Blockhead Li Jianheng could tell that Xiao Qie was hinting at something to him. But with Xue Xiuzhua's interruption, he did not know how to continue. Scratching his cheeks, he looked at Hai Liangi and asked, "What does the Secretariat Elder think?" Hai Liangi did not look at any of them. After a moment's pause, he said, "Is your lordship worried that the joint trial by the 3 judicial offices will drag the case on for too long?" Xiao Qie said, "The workflow of the joint trial by the 3 judicial offices is too complex. Wei Huaigu has been in the top position for so long that his thinking and methods are all different from the common man. I'm worried that it will cause further complications if we keep him around for too long." Li Jianheng hurriedly cut in, "That's right. The Wei clan has always shown filial respect to the Empress Dowager. If this case drags on for too long, I'm worried that the Empress Dowager will be overwhelmed with worries and end up causing her health to deteriorate." But without the joint trial by the 3 judicial offices, we can't thoroughly investigate the various profiteering loose ends down there. Disagreeing, Kong Chiu said, these people are only this audacious before they have Wei Huaigu to shield them. It'll be a disaster to let all of them run free. I'm merely worried about the time. I'm not saying that we shouldn't investigate. Xiaoqia looked at Li Jianheng. Don't tell me this is the only course for Kudu to take? Something clicked in Li Jianheng's mind, and he slapped his thigh and picked up the thread. For a speedy investigation, we should let the imperial bodyguards handle it. That Shun Zichuan was pretty fast in his handling of the previous matter in which Shi Hongxian assembled notorious bandit. Why not let him take charge of this case? Xue Xiuzhua said, this is such a major case. I'm afraid it won't do to hand it over to the vice-commander of the imperial bodyguards. Shun Zichuan will be limited by his rank. It'd be more appropriate to hand it to the commander-in-chief, Han Cheng. Xiaoqia shifted his gaze to Xue Xiuzhua's face and pulled his lips into a smile. He said, that's right. Shun Zichuan is indeed not suitable to take charge of this case. He's young and lacking in experience, and he has a long-standing grudge against me. I can't rest reassured if we hand it over to him. On the contrary, his retreat in order to advance for convinced Hai Liangyi. Hai Liangyi knew Han Qing had some friendly relations with Xiaoqia too. He was worried that Xiaoqia might use this and go too far with his handling of this case, so he might as well hand it over to Shun Zichuan, who had always been at odds with Xiaoqia, to handle. With both men standing in diametrical opposition to each other and mutually monitoring one another, no one would be able to play dirty tricks and tamper with the case. Your lordship, this is just your prejudice. Shun Zichuan is indeed young and lacking in experience, but it was by imperial decree he was first promoted up the ranks where he dealt with one tough case after another. Letting him gain more experience is a good thing too. Hai Liangyi turned to Li Jianheng and said, having the imperial bodyguards as the chief investigators of this case means that it'll be handled by the imperial prison, and it just so happened that Shun Zichuan is the northern judge. 5. Given his official duties and job responsibilities, his handling of the case is justified and reasonable. It's just that it's inadvisable to persist in aiming for speed. Although we are bypassing the joint trial by the 3 judicial offices, there is still a need for the 3 judicial offices to supervise. What does your majesty think? Li Jianheng knew that Hai Liangyi was making concessions by this. He did not dare to be too overly partial towards Xiaoqia, so he instantly agreed and said, I'll issue the edict to him right at once to start the investigation tonight. 2 consecutive days of official discussions in Mingli Hall finally came to a momentary halt. Everyone had to return and rest for a night. As they stepped out of the hall, Li Jianheng specifically let the eunuchs carry the sedan and send Hai Liangyi to the palace gates to get on his horse carriage. Kong Qiu and the rest walked out together. Xiaoqia nodded farewell to them and left alone. Kong Qiu looked at Xiaoqia's back and sighed, the way I see it, he's too broken-hearted to trust the Ministry of Justice to preside over the case and wants to investigate it together with Han Cheng. Sun Yu descended the stairs and said, and look at just who Han Cheng is? The Secretariat Elder was right to choose Shun Zichuan. Is Yanqing heading straight back to your residence? Xue Xiuzhua followed behind them with a smile on his face and said, yes. I've been resting in the office compound these few days. I should go back tonight and get the preparations ready. There are still cases to handle a few days later. Sun Yu was very caring and nurturing of his juniors, and promoted them very often. He had personally guided Yu Xiaozai of the Chief Surveillance Bureau, whose career had blossomed under his mentorship, and he occasionally gave Shun Zichuan advice too, all of which was out of concern. He also valued Xue Xiuzhua's talents, so when he heard these words of his, he simply had to encourage him some. The 3 men got into their respective horse carriages at the palace entrance. It was deep in the night when the servant of the Xue's residence heard a knock at the door, so he threw on his clothes and came out for a look. Standing outside the door were all solemn-looking imperial bodyguards with their blades. He was startled. Before he had time to ask questions, Qiao Tianyao, who was at the lead, leisurely squeezed his way through the door and pushed the man aside. "Have you eaten? It's still early at present, so you probably haven't taken your meal yet. Then go inform the kitchen to prepare meals for us imperial bodyguards too. And while you are at it, call everyone up. We're going to search the residence." The steward lifted his lantern to stop him in his tracks and yelled, "Your Excellency, how can you do this? You haven't produced the search warrant. Take all those who obstruct official duties and hold up the search and arrest into the imperial prison." Shun Zichuan stood at the entrance, his gaze sinister and ruthless. "Tell Xue Xiuzhua that I'm looking for him,"